Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. My name is Brian Vitale, and if you've listened to the podcast so far this year in 2022, you'll know that we've had kind of a rotating cast of participants on the podcast. And I think this time, here we are, halfway through February, we've got pretty much everyone that's shown up on the podcast so far this year has all made it back here today. So a little bit of a bigger crew. Let's go through them. Welcome back, Josh Torres.
One of the craziest weeks of my life.
We've got Jess Reyes.
Hey again.
Adam Vitale.
Hello.
James Galizio.
I played nothing but MMOs this week.
And Chow Min Woo.
How's it going?
Welcome, everyone, to this Tetracast. This is going to be a surprisingly jam-packed episode, as it is whenever there's a week where we have a surprise Nintendo Direct, because those are always announced like, a day and a half in advance. So you listened to our last podcast, the first one in February, and it was a shorter cast. We talked about Arceus. We talked about a few other news bits. Little did we know that we would, a few days later, have a deluge of news from a Nintendo Direct to talk about this week. And on top of that, there's a few games that we also want to talk about as well as we get into what we've kind of been anticipating from the previous month. All the stuff's coming out in February. Well, it seems like we're at the crescent of that all coming to fruition as a bunch of games start to release, or we start to get our hands on some pre-release access to things that we're trying to queue up as we go into kind of the main part of the year. One of the major games that wasn't really on my radar, but it seems to have taken kind of the gaming world by storm, is Lost Ark. So I know we'll have a few people on the podcast to talk about that when we get into the Games Talk section. Before we do, though, we do have a few features up on the site that I do want to talk about that kind of round out a few of the things that we had discussed in the previous weeks. We've obviously spent the last 2 weeks talking with James and Jess, and then Adam and I had kind of started last week talking about Pokemon Arceus, obviously probably the biggest release of January. We're not going to probably spend too much of the podcast time talking about that today, but I did also just want to shout out that Jess did publish her formal review for Pokemon Arceus up on the site. Now, if you've listened to the last 2 episodes, you've probably heard Jess and us kind of talk about our impressions with the game. But Jess, did you just want to kind of talk about what your ending conclusion was when you wrote up your formal review for Arceus?
Oh, my ending conclusion was the gameplay is like the big part that stands out about it because, they basically revamp the turn-based combat. They add new ways to interact and engage with Pokemon. Yeah, there's some frame rate issues, and I know people are always slamming the graphics, but honestly, some of it looks fine. It's just like, if your Pokemon is glitching into trees and kind of flying sometimes, it's kind of hard to throw the Pokeball. And
you also
I like the part of your review that's like unidentified flying Pokemon, and it's a Machop. I can identify it, but it's Machop, but it shouldn't be flying.
Yeah, there's actually, I saw way crazier ones on Twitter that I couldn't find. Like there was someone that's like their Machop. There's like, I think it was an alpha Machop that was like literally flying right above them, and it was just captioned, "Oh, hello."
And one major part of your review was basically just kind of saying that the story, I mean, it's a Pokemon game, and I think we talked about it briefly on the podcast last week, where it's like, it's there.
Yeah.
Not much more to say on that.
When I thought about it, I was like, well, it's Pokemon, so it's not that great. But I was like, well, I should still say that it's not that great. I feel like they had some potential going for it, but the way it wrapped up was not really that satisfying to me.
I thought that the last bit of the game, like once you explore all the regions, once you kind of get that loop out, and it's just kind of like straight battles from there to the end and through the post game, that's kind of when that kind of lost me. But obviously, go ahead and read Jess's review if you're interested, and or listen to the last 2 episodes of the podcast. We've got timestamps for our 2 sessions of Pokemon Arceus discussions.
Surely this is one of those games that will just wait for the Switch Pro, just like Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Just another one on that pile. I'll touch you maybe when the Switch Pro comes out.
And
maybe?
For a split second, this is how dumb my brain is. I'm like, or maybe we can just be like Triangle Strategy and wait for it to come to PC. Oh wait, never mind. It's a Pokemon game.
Pokemon on PC would be pretty nice.
That'd be pretty great, actually. I'm all up for it.
I'll go boot up Temtem again or something. I don't know.
Coromon.
What's the other one that's coming out?
There's a lot of them. Coromon's coming out.
The Pearl Abyss one comes to my mind.
Oh, Dokkaebi.
Yeah, there we go.
We do also have 2 other features up on the site that I want to give shout outs to. We got a freelance preview on Elden Ring. So we've already had a few different discussions on Elden Ring based on James and Josh's time on with the stress test or whatever they formerly called it. But we also had a freelancer, Amy. What's her last name? I'm sorry. Amy Eastland was able to go with hands-on with Elden Ring with a 6-hour preview that we got up on the site. And obviously that is probably the big release for the end of February that we're hoping to get our hands on soon. But we're able to get at least one person hands-on to give us a look ahead on what to expect for that. So give that a read if you're interested.
I know this might sound a little bit silly, but do any of us know Amy either personally or professionally?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I introduced her to Alex. I met her from the Start menu, which is a small, mostly student publication where lots of games journalists start. So she's a beginner, but I think she has potential. So I was like, hey, I could let Alex know that you're interested. And I don't know when exactly they discussed Elden Ring, but I guess it happened at some point.
Yeah. So first of all, I know Alex, Alex being basically who runs the site. He wants to do more of this sort of freelancer stuff. We're in terms of we don't really have like the operational coordination to do a lot of freelancing stuff. He wants to do more of it, so that's kind of where this opportunity arose. But I believe what this was Bandai Namco did, and they've done this before. They did like a streaming preview where you basically you stream basically a preview version of the game from a Bandai Namco computer in UK or something. And then she basically participated in this event and wrote up her thoughts on it. And that's what the previews this week that popped up, at other sites. That's what it's based off of, is this sort of preview event. So Alex was able to have Amy write for us.
George was able to do that too with Bandai Namco.
Yeah, they did that with Tales and also with Scarlet Nexus too. So it works.
Yeah, that's what game preview streaming is. It's cloud versions of the game.
Now I'm imagining someone playing a cloud version of the cloud version of Kingdom Hearts or something like that. I don't know. And the last feature up on the site that I want to give a shout out right now is that we were able to get kind of a question and answer interview with Gust for the upcoming. This is kind of an under the radar February release. Atelier Sophie 2, The Alchemist of the Mysterious Dream, was releasing in the same week as Elden Ring in the last week of February. So Paige Chamberlain was able to correct me if I'm wrong, Adam. She was able to just submit questions to Gust to kind of get answered on that after she had also played a preview portion of the game. So it's kind of Paige has had the opportunity to both kind of get a conversation with the developers as well as go hands-on with Atelier Sophie 2.
I actually think some of the questions that he returned were pretty thorough. Sometimes with these sort of ad hoc email interviews, sometimes they're just kind of just bullet point,
they basically
press release sort of, here's what the game is. But I feel like he gave some good answers about why did we go back to Sophie, and what do you think about, one of Paige's questions was how do you kind of revolving around how do you evolve the series, especially a series like this that kind of has a release every year or so. But I think it's a pretty good interview, pretty good just set of question and answers. So check it out if you're an Atelier fan.
And
it's
also,
a shame that Sophie 2 and Elden Ring don't release on the same day, so we couldn't get any cool collab fan art of Sophie and Elden Ring dude hanging out.
But yeah, it's just a little bit of this is not really a secret, but sometimes we submit these question and answers, and then what we get back we don't like, and we just don't publish. That has happened. So the fact that
I've done that I did that with Neo too. I sent some questions, and then the answers I got back were basically just like the fact sheet or the store page. yeah, regurgitated. And I'm like,
they might as well just say, they might as well just answer. It's we assure you, it's a very good game. You will like it, and then that's all you have to answer. And sure enough,
it was a very good game, and I liked it.
we think it's great. Also, we made it and want you to buy it. So we always try to avoid that.
But yeah, these Atelier questions I think are actually pretty good. The answers, I mean.
Nice.
And then, of course, we always also have a bunch of the Arceus guides are still being clicked through on our site, as well as I think Andrea put up a Valentine's Day event guide for Final Fantasy XIV. So those are up on the site if you happen to be playing those games still. And now, without further ado, I am going to hand the reins over to Josh, who has quickly. Well,
Josh is like, I'm not ready.
Oh gosh.
I mean, you've played the most of Lost
There's a lot of
Ark.
pressure. It's here after releasing in Korea in I think 2018. I could be wrong. It's been a few years. Lost Ark has finally released in the West. It's the first MMO I've touched. If you consider Phantasy Star Online 2 as an MMO, then maybe that kind of counts. But I didn't really play much of that. But it's like the first MMO I've touched since like the first month of A Realm Reborn.
You didn't play New World?
Did not play New World. It's crazy. I know. I've only heard really good things about New
World. I played
like
30 hours of the preview of New World, and then I just never got around to it.
Yeah, I've reached almost 40 hours into Lost Ark, and it only released for early access on Tuesday, so it's kind of consumed my life for a good bit. I'm only on the lower end compared to some friends. Some friends already have like 70 hours into it, so.
It's kind of surreal that, like, I remember Lost Ark was, like, originally announced. I know MMOs just take a long time to make, right?
Yeah.
But Lost Ark was originally announced in, like, 2014, like 8 years ago, for Korea. And then it got, like, a Korean, like, beta test, like, in 2017 or something like that. So 3 years later, and then it released. So it's been out in Korea and I think also Russia for a few years, right? For some reason, it feels like Russia kind of gets early access to some of these
Korea,
MMOs.
Russia, Japan are the three regions it's been out on before.
But now it's in English and a few other languages too.
Yeah, it's
worldwide.
It's like a lot of languages, and like pretty much the entire world has access to it, besides like the Netherlands and Belgium because of like laws, like gotcha loot box laws, I believe.
Sorry, Belgians.
Yeah. I don't know where to even start. It's a
what type of like I've seen you play a little bit of this, but it looks like it's sort of like an online. Like I'm thinking about like gameplay and almost like perspective. It's like a kind of like an online Diablo-ish Korean MMORPG.
Isometric action RPG, much like your Diablo, Path of Exile, Grim Dawn, all those sort of games that like have that classic isometric viewpoint. It's not as super fast paced as like how Path of Exile or Diablo can be. Like it is on the slower side, but it's more deliberate.
It's not just a like a clicker like in Diablo. Some people criticize Diablo as you're just clicking everywhere.
Yeah, no, this one is slightly more like
you feel a little more sluggish. It feels more like playing League, I would say. You know how your character moves.
Yeah, like for example, like there'll be like bosses in the game, and then they telegraph their attacks on the ground, like say, hey, attack's about to come out. Here's like a red cone, and then like you should try to get out of the way of this attack. And like how the movement is set up in the game is like most of the time, if you can try to like run out of it, but you always have like or most classes have like an emergency like dodge button. Like I play as the sorceress, and she has like a teleport button. And like if I'm too far out to like get out of that red damage zone, I can use that, and then it'll be like a 10-second cooldown.
So does it have like a pretty like what sort of like character creation like class and race?
Yeah,
like, is it pretty typical or
so the game is divided up into 5 like base classes, and this is like your warrior, your mage, your martial artist, your assassin, and I forgot the other one off the top of my head there. And then each of these classes have like a variable number of subclasses beneath them. Like at the start, like for the Western version, like the Western release has less classes than Korea and Russia. Like we're missing some classes that are already present in those. Like,
because we're getting like the game as of like year 2 of its original release. We don't quite have everything up to date from the Korean client.
Oh, it's a mixed bag in that sense where we don't have
the
like
raid tier, right, or something like that.
We have the current tier 3 gear, but we don't have all the raids. Like the Argos raid, for example, is coming next month, and that's already been out in those other territories. And then there's other like our version's like it's like a weird mishmash because Sorceress is one of the newest classes in those regions, Like one of the newest class in there in those regions is artist, but before artist came sorceress. So that's still very brand new.
Wait, artist is the class?
Yeah, artist is a class, and she looks really cool to play.
Kind of like that, kind of like a weird take on like a bard or something.
Yeah, she's like a debuff class, I believe. But summoner was like I think one of the launch classes or very close to launch, and that was originally available in like the closed beta of this game. But then for some reason, and no one really knows why, they swapped out summoner for sorceress instead for the launch release. And then for the content that we have in the game, it's like they're referred to as tiers in the other releases, where you have tier 1 end game gear that you build up, and then after you get through tier 1 end game gear, you go to the next tier of tier 2 gear, and then so forth, upgrade that, go through end game content, and then you get tier 3 gear. So that's where we're at. We're like halfway through tier 3 on that like upper end game spectrum that I'm not even at yet. I'm still in the middle of tier 1.
And instead of starting like I know like that was kind of a requisite conversation because we're talking about like what version of the game we currently have.
Exactly.
But like if I'm logging into the game for the first time and I'm obviously just going to experience the leveling and the progression, like just is it very, very story based? Is it more like mission based? Just kind of like paint the picture about like I'm logging in, I've created my character. Now how does the game unfold?
I would actually want to hear James's and Chao's thoughts on that, because they're going through the current leveling process to level 50. I mean, I'm past that. I can give more concrete thoughts, but I want to hear their experience since they're in the middle of that right now.
I will say that the questing is pretty bad, but the leveling experience is actually is decent. Like there's
I'm sitting here like folding my arms, like substantiate that. How can the questing be bad but the leveling be good?
There is good pacing. The story isn't amazing. It's not like, I mean, 14 story is like kind of.
It's a high bar.
It's an
would you say, what do you like? Let's compare this like El Realm Reborn story, right? Because you're starting with a base story. Like if you're like trying to give like, is it like kind of like the current level? Like in my opinion, like leveling through the game is like kind of not the worst part about it, but it's like it's cool seeing it for the first time with these big set piece moments. But for me, the real interesting content to me personally in the game is the all the activities that open up once you reach level 50.
Yeah, and I haven't reached that yet. What I will say is that the way the story works, it kind of reminds me of like Final Fantasy 3, where it's like a bunch of little disjointed things that are loosely tied together, it feels like. So for example, like you start off and it's just like, okay, you're in a bog standard, like starting, well, where do I even start with the story?
It is so like, yeah, because like even before the story begins, there's already a shitload of lore behind it and whatnot. And I'll just sum it up as like, hey, you eventually like the basic premise of the story is there's this demonic invasion happening throughout the world, and in the history of this world, there are these ancient artifacts called arcs, and like these arcs, once reunited together, will give humans like the power they need to drive back the demonic invasion.
And you need to find the lost one.
Exactly. You need to find all the arcs are lost. So you need to go find them, and they're spread out through different continents throughout the entire world.
Why aren't we lost arcs?
Well, you know how ancient legends go. Like after it's been used, like it's like the Dragon Balls. Like, oh, once you've used it, they've all spread out across the world once again. So that's my basic understanding of the story after like mashing through it a lot.
And I'm imagining a Dragon Balls.
But like in each of the continents, they have like their problems, their own set of problems. They tackle different themes, different topics. They have like their own set of characters, and like there's like political drama and personal drama, and your standard like MMO stuff. And as James was saying, like the actual quest design itself isn't that great throughout the leveling process, because a lot of it is like, go here, talk to this person. They might have you go kill this amount of like things, or go gather fucking rats' asses for them. And
I was watching you earlier today, and it was literally kill 5 rats or 15 rats. Or
We'll get into that later. But
the pacing is good, which is why I said that while the questing is definitely not amazing, the actual like leveling experience is a brisk pace. And even if the story isn't amazing, it's engaging enough to keep you going, especially when I've been surprised at how well it handles scale when it really wants to. Like, I remember the first like major dungeon, the Morai Ruins, like the way that they opened it up and how it like really started pushing itself forward. I was impressed because up until then, like the first two dungeons, well, first two required dungeons were pretty standard affair. I feel like for an MMO, like early game dungeon. Then they were like, okay, we're going to really get going now.
Yeah, I don't know if you've reached the point like there's a really big cinematic set piece moment that involves a siege on a castle. I don't know if you've reached that yet, but that's like the point where it's like, damn, they really know how to fucking handle scale in this game because you'll see this really big siege with like a shitload of troops on the ground, like like trying to siege this castle. And then when someone told me, "Hey, by the way, this game is built on Unreal Engine 3," and it was all still smooth and stable at that point, I'm like, you got to be kidding me! There's no way, you know. But yes, this entire game is built on Unreal Engine 3, and to people who don't know what that is, that's like Gears of War 1 era, PS3 360 era.
It is kind of weird that like we've had such a good run with Unreal Engine 4 and 5. Like 3 was the era of like terrible pop-in and like stutter or whatever, but apparently that's not the case here.
Yeah, I don't know how
it looks really good for an MMO. And I guess the one thing I do want to say, well, first off, actually, I've gotten the boat, so I mean, I'm pretty decently into the leveling experience. I think I'm like halfway through the story because once you get the boat, it kind of slows down the leveling a bit because you got a bunch of different locations you can go to.
Yeah, and for people who's like, hey, like, do I really have to bother, like, with like all side content on the way? It's like if you just want to like, hey, you want to get to experience like
Well,
what the end game activities look like it's not like a big like time sink because like if you just follow the main story quests on their own and just mainline it, you'll get there naturally. You'll reach it. You don't have to do like anything side on the way to that. Like but you should play it at your own pace. Play it at the way that makes you feel comfortable.
so
There's like no
granted,
rush.
you'll want to eventually do as much of the side content as you can because of roster levels.
Eventually, but that's a long term goal. That's the
Yeah.
thing. Like if you're like because let's explain roster level a little bit. There's two levels. There's your character level, obviously, and then roster level is something you accrue over time that like you'll gain like passive stats for like your entire roster of characters. So you make an alt and like you have like roster level 13 and it gives you like 13 vitality, 10 intelligence, 10 strength, etc. Like it'll apply that to that character and all the other alts that you make for that character.
So here's a quick question, since I
Yeah.
haven't actually leveled my alts yet. I'm waiting to get my main to, well,
Mhm.
quote unquote main to 50. Do you have to do the story again if you do
No.
a power pass or?
No. After you reach 50 and then you complete like a certain like thing in the main story quest, they'll give you a power pass for free and then you consume that power pass and then you can use it at the character selection menu and then that'll uh level that all to 50 and have it complete all the main story quests up until the end of a continent called Shoeshire. And then that means they'll have their base item level 302 gear that's their starting point. So they can immediately start doing chaos dungeons, guardian raids, and start funneling materials into like your main for them to upgrade. So that's kind of
Do other MMOs have like a system like that where you can kind of just like have an alt just sort of skip to, I don't know if you call it end game, but like skip to basically skipping.
Well, there's almost
all that
always at
content?
least like a level booster in a shop that you can buy, but that's not quite the same.
Yeah,
Isn't
it's
it a little different for Lost Ark? You have to see the story first before they let you buy the skip.
So you only for the first time, like in our version of the game, the first character, you do the main story stuff, and then after you get to the end of Shoeshire, that content, that main story content, you'll get a gear set that has item level 302 and that power pass. You consume that power pass. Actually, you don't. You get the power pass a little bit earlier than that, but you consume that power pass, and once you apply it to an alt character, say I have a sorceress as a main, and I have a scrapper as an alt. The scrapper is one of the subclasses in the game. So I use that power pass on the scrapper. when I use that power pass on the scrapper, it does several things. One, it gets their level to 50. Two, it auto completes all the side quests that give a skill potion as a reward. So you don't have to do those side quests on your main, because if you use that power pass, those skill points are applied to the entire roster of your account.
It's almost like the skill point system in that way is indirectly an account unlock. You get it once in your first character.
Yeah.
And you don't have to worry about it again.
I've been doing those side quests because they actually seemed interesting enough.
Yeah, if you want to see them, that's fine. Yeah, there's no if you think they're interesting and they're worth doing, go for it. Because that don't spoil yourself on the experience. If you want to see them, go for it.
This generally, if I'm understanding it properly, it seems pretty smart in terms of like being able to have more than one character sort of at like some sort of playable point, rather than having to kind of have to go through the whole main introduction to the story multiple times over.
Yeah, so I'm gonna get to more of it. So, and then 3, like I mentioned earlier, that character you use a power pass on, they get their item level 302 gear. That's kind of like let's call it the quote unquote start of your end game progression. That's like the base equipment that you want on them to start it. So now they can like do the dailies, and then those dailies reward you with mats that you can funnel those mats into your main, so they have more mats to play around with to upgrade them to push more end game content. And for our version of the game, for the Western version, upon consuming that first power pass, you're immediately given a second power pass to give on a second character on that. On top of that, there's also a function in the stronghold system that you eventually unlock, and throughout the main story, you get your own stronghold, and it's kind of like your housing system. You can customize it the way you want. It has like different functions for several systems in the game. One of those functions is called knowledge transfer, and knowledge transfer is basically you spend 600 gold that you accrue through the game doing dailies, weeklies, selling stuff in the auction house for gear that you don't need. And all sorts of stuff. You spend 600 gold, and then it'll level a character to 50 in 8 hours passively. So it's just like you spend the 600 gold to go level a character for 8 hours, and you don't have to worry about it. And then so right off the bat, you can have like 2 to 3 alts fully at level 50, ready to go if you want them to do dailies to funnel more mats into your main, for them to upgrade, to have more mats to upgrade their gear, because upgrading their gear will raise item level, and item level is kind of like the bare power level key to push like higher tiers of endgame. Yeah, essentially. So say like I want to take on level 4 of the Chaos Dungeon, but level 4 requires 420 item level. It's like, okay, I can use this main to like push that gear score to unlock that. And just because you have like let's say I have like 800 item level, and I want to like do this like lower tier thing, that doesn't mean that like those things are like less dangerous. Like those things can still fuck you up, even though you may have better gear, because this game is really all about the skill of the player and learning boss mechanics.
So does it like scale you back down to like some sort of normalized level? Like if you have a gear score of 800 and you're doing a dungeon that requires like 500,
I don't think it's
tuned in a way where it's just tuned in a way where it still feels meaningful, and you're not just like a god walking through like stopping everything.
Yeah, I don't think it's because it's still you still have to do the boss mechanics and play by those rules, because there'll be like some instant kill mechanics. Let's say like let's say there's like a boss that stacks like a debuff on you, and if it gets a debuff off on like one of your raid party, it'll do like an instant kill attack on all of you. Like that's not something you can just like push through gear. You still have to.
I've got 800,000 HP now. I'm good. Nope, instant death is still instant death.
Yeah, you
some of these conveniences that you're talking about, like the power packs and the passive leveling. Like I don't know this for sure. Maybe you do, but it sounds like to me like that might have been stuff that was like introduced over time in the original launch, and then they kind of like got filtered in as the game life.
I'm sure that some of it was there at launch, because you have to remember this is a free-to-play Korean MMO.
Well, that's why I would think if it's a free-to-play MMO, they would be less incentivized to convenience the player. Like they would be like, you wanna level up a second character. That's what I was wondering. Like, you want to get a second character, then you better pay $5 for a booster or something.
Yeah, like a lot of this right now, like the power pass stuff, like the 2 power passes. I think that's only for our version, like from the get go, because they want to have a very good first impression on the game and make it and like make it so that like it's very fair to like people who want to play for free. Like the only thing you pay for in the game really is like pay for convenience in the sense that like, hey, if you want your pet to be like an external storage for you or like have access to your storage like just from your pet instead of going to the NPC in town, that does it for you. Or like paying a very very small silver fee that you get thousands of in the like normally in the game. Like if you have like this crystalline aura on you, that'll make fast travel for free instead of paying for this very minimal silver cost to fast travel.
Yeah, they've also like made some changes to the Western version that very explicitly is meant to be more palpable for players. Like from what I understand, in the non-Western release, in order to have your pet automatically pick up like items for you, you needed to have the premium sub, like the Crystalline Aura. But in this one, anyone that has a pet, it'll just automatically pick them up by default.
Yeah.
Is there still a premium sub option in the Western release?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, the Crystalline Aura is still a thing. Like I have it on. It's like it's nice to have, but it's not like mandatory to have by any means.
It is interesting with these like free to play and buy to play online experiences. It's like pay for cosmetic, people seem to almost universally be fine with. Pay to win, obviously the opposite. But then like pay for convenience is always like a fine line, because the 2 games that I've played, Guild Wars 2 and Phantasy Star Online 2, like Guild Wars 2 has some pay for convenience that I think is like really fine. It's just really just kind of like a nice to have. And then like there's Phantasy Star Online 2 where it's like it's more like pay to not be inconvenienced rather than pay for convenience. It's like if you don't pay for anything, you have very little inventory room. You can't use the personal shop. You can't do this. You can't do that. So it's almost like pay to not be, a second class citizen. So it's always interesting for pay to convenience. You have to really kind of look into like how the game works, what is actually being offered, how much does it cost, can you get it with in-game currency or whatever.
Here's the real convenience for if you bought it early with the Founders Pack. I am on the server Avesta. My server is now closed to the outside world as of like Thursday afternoon in Pacific. So no free to play people can come in for an uncertain amount of time. So I don't ever have to worry about long queues in my server.
Wow,
to get in.
server.
I don't have to worry. Yeah, I don't have to worry about it being overloaded or whatnot. I can just freely log in whenever I want and not have to worry about a long wait. So that's
I guess we should have mentioned here that like I think literally right now there's like more than 1 million
1.3 million. Yeah,
on Steam.
Something like that.
It's insane.
So,
is that number 1 right now? I forget where I go to Steam to see what the
I believe it is.
Think about it like this. The director's hope for the game before release, before it launched, was he hopes to see 200,000 concurrent users on it. That was his hope for the game.
Jesus. 200,000.
So let's go back a little bit on like the classes. This still does have some of those Korean MMO tropes. There are gender locked classes. So like Sorcerers, for example, is only, and Bard, they're only females. There's no male variant to them. You can't choose them as males. They're only females. Which
is really, really fucking funny, because there's NPCs who are bards that are dudes.
Yeah. And the developer Smilegate is slowly starting to like make them ungender locked in the sense that they're making like male variants. Like the War Dancer class, for example, is female. But then they later released the Striker class, which is sort of like the male War Dancer class. They still have their own unique skills and play styles, but they're built off of the same framework, and like the way they function in a group is still functionally similar. And like the other like gender unlocked class is like the Gunslinger is a female, and then the Deadeye is a male. Deadeye is a male gunslinger. Except with Gunslinger, she has this unique ability to switch between 3 weapons on the fly. So like pistol, shotgun, and I think rifle. And so instead of like every class only being bound to 8 skills, she's bound to 24 skills. So they all do have their own unique skills for each stance. And and Deadeye has the same unique gimmick, but he benefits more from like a shotgun back attacks. He has more modifiers for that. So like gameplay variances in that aspect with the gender unlock classes.
I do wonder if, well, for one thing, obviously the launch at least has been a massive, massive success for them. Like I remembered like seeing a link going around from like a Korean news site that apparently Smilegate reported that they'd sold over 1.5 million founders packs before the non-early access launch.
Oh my god,
It was just insane.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that. I have multiple.
How many founders packs did you buy?
Okay, so a friend of mine last November gifted me bronze. Okay, it's like you should go check this game out. I'll gift you bronze, and then you can check out the closed beta. I'm like, all right, thanks, cool. I didn't really think about Lost Ark at that time last November. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll check out closed beta. I was like, okay, this seems like really fun. And then like as the release is coming closer, I researched more, and I'm like, okay, well, all right, I'll buy it at gold. I'll buy it at gold. Sure, why not? And then
of course they stack. So
yeah, and then I told myself, I was like, if I get to 50 before the free to play launch, clearly this game has its hooks in me. So if I get there, I guess I'll get platinum. And sure enough, like a day and a half, almost 2 days before free to play launch, I hit 50, and I'm like, fuck. All right, I'm not a bitch.
So you have 3 founders packs.
3 founders packs for my fucking thing.
Yeah. I feel like so really quick, I do just want for disclosure and whatnot.
Yeah.
While I did buy a bronze founder pack, I did get a code for a platinum founders pack. I'm assuming it was through Amazon, though Alex was the one that dealt with that. So yeah, Alex is here. We didn't introduce him yet, I don't think. But
he was waiting to chime in on Elden Ring, but yes, I guess this is a perfect time. Hi, welcome, Alex. You're in the middle of Lost Ark.
I've just been listening to this MMO chatter with my eyes glazed over.
I'm sorry. Yeah, but
I was going to ask if Alex has any interest in this game, but apparently not.
My only interest in this game is in if it's going to have legs from a website perspective, right? It looks like it will, apparently.
Well, I mean, the last time we talked about a game having like 1 million concurrent on Steam was like what, Cyberpunk, which did not have legs. So
this is
a very
true.
Different game.
Yeah,
single player.
But also, I see a lot of parallels between this. And to be fair, right? What was the other one? New World, right? And New World dropped off extremely quickly. So the question is, from my perspective, as someone who is not that infused to play it, although I did play one of these 2 games, is this going to be a New World, or is this going to be a Genshin Impact sort of situation? Genshin is around to stay, is a huge success. New World, people are still playing it, but New World was one of these games where I don't think it hit the million mark, but I think
900,000.
The 900,000 concurrents, and it is nowhere near that now. So we'll see. And yeah, to answer your question, James, it came through a PR agency that's running PR for that game, and we probably would have written more about it, but the whole pre-release situation on that front was a bit messy, where it was like, here's access to a press server, but then we're going to erase all your progress. And we were like, well, hang on, we don't really necessarily want to do that because people are already playing on public early access servers. Why can't we just have an early access code? And then eventually they came back and just gave us platinum code, which you then used.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a
little bit of a shame, because it's like by the time we got to it, it's like, oh well, crap, a bunch of guides were already out. Shit.
I mean, yeah, like the guides were already out way long before release, because people are playing on the Russia servers. A lot of the English players of this game played on the Russia servers, so they already used like a lot of old guides that are still very applicable today on that. And it, like the game is the game transforms at level 50. Like there's pre-fifth level 50 Lost Ark, which is your standard run-of-the-mill amusement park MMO, which has really cool set piece moments, but it's your standard MMO experience, leveling experience. Well, at level 50, things really open up, and like what activities you can do. It's kind of the world is at your fingertips at that point. Like for me personally, right now, like I'm trying to push my item level up through upgrading gear, and the way I'm doing that is traveling to different islands. And that's a really cool feature about this game is once you get your ship and you get to level 50, there are all these small little islands that in between each continent as you're sailing between each continent, and they're all very different. They're like kind of an excuse to have like really fun zones in them. For example, earlier today, like I was like on a big cruise liner doing tasks and like cleaning up around the cruise liner, and at another island, it was literally just called Panda Island, and you know what? It was fucking full of pandas.
Yeah, you went to Panda Island, and then you became a panda.
I became a panda. It was so cute and adorable. I could roll. There were some great panda animations of like baby pandas getting rolled around by their mom.
You had a dedicated button for pulling out bamboo and eating it.
Yeah, it was great. I was like, this is fantastic. There's
Game
like
of the year.
And then like I've seen like another island that's like a more like standard sci-fi, or not sci-fi, but like a standard horror experience like Resident Evil. There's like another island that's like a fucking big dance party of like people just like discoing at the middle of the island. And it's and then there's another one that's like about etymology and like studying birds. It's like it's really cool just to see like all these different things, and like gives a variety on what you're seeing and like the tasks that you're doing in there. Like another one was like I was like cleaning up for a pirate den, and that's where Adam saw me killing rats because I was getting rid of their pest problem there.
Well, that seems like a fun way to like have to add content to it. They can like literally add islands.
Yeah, the island paradigm is a pretty nice one, just to have like varied little mini storylines or whatnot, or locations.
Yeah, right. It's just convenient.
Just make a new island
storytelling, and also for like a live service game, a way to just add on. At least in principle, having not played it. I guess I'll just latch onto that. And one of the pre-release videos, I remember talking with Josh late January about. I didn't realize that they're going to spend so much time talking about your shipbuilding and your crew and all the RPG systems there. So like, is that mostly a progression thing, or is that mostly end game, or does it kind of straddle both?
It's straddling both. Like for example, like you'll get some different ships throughout the game. So like to get into Shoeshire, for example, one of the later continents, they'll be like, oh, there's like a block of ice in the way. Go use the Stormbreaker ship to like break through the ice to access that continent. And then there'll be like certain regions where like the hazardous waters, or like the level of it is too much, and like weaker ships can't go through that. You have to get through use like more stronger ships to push through that. Right now I'm at this weird really dangerous mindset where a cool thing about when you're traveling through ships is you can just set an auto route. You can like pull up the map and then press Alt left click on like an island, and it'll like automatically set a route there and then move. But there'll be times there were times throughout like the sailing through the ship that like you have a boost gauge, and like you press spacebar and then you get a boost, and then like it'll expend this meter. Then you have to wait for it to fill up and then press space again. And I'm like, okay, well, this is cool, but I have to sit here and like kind of be on top of like pressing space. But there's a skin for a ship in the cash shop where it does that for you.
Oh, so it's pay for cosmetics and convenience.
It will press spacebar for you in the auto route. And
you know what else can do that? A macro. I would just have like a ship boosting macro.
Well, here's a question, Josh. How much does it cost?
I have enough crystals to do it.
How much does it cost?
It's like 400 blue crystals, I think.
Oh, that's nothing. That like if you got the bronze founder pack, I think you get enough crystals.
Can you earn crystals by playing?
I think so. I believe
some.
Some.
Okay.
Some.
Josh is just here like wrestling with himself. Like, do I buy this convenience, or does that like?
Am I part of the problem?
Does that look bad on me?
Yeah. Am I like? If I too far in, if I do that, then I'm like, I have to just. So, yeah.
Not everyone has purchased 3 founders packs worth of blue crystals or whatever.
And then, like, there's so much other things to talk about the game that I don't really want to spend the whole podcast because it's easy to talk about this for hours. But I'll just say that the way that like you use skills in this game is pretty cool, like the skill progression, because the game really heavily encourages like finding your own play style and finding a set of skills that you're comfortable with using. So this game has free respect anywhere, anytime outside of battle for you to use. And you can even make like custom set presets of skills. So like if you want a skill preset for chaos dungeons and a skill preset for raids, you can like set those up on the fly to use between them. And when each skill has like 3 tiers of modifiers. So with the more skill points that you put into it. So say like I have this torrent, a water torrent skill, and I put like points into it. I can modify it so it has more AOE, and it does more damage to mobs that are immune to pushback, and it'll turn it into fire as well as one of the modifiers to do burn damage instead. Now that can be done with all your skills. And you can obviously set them all up the way you want it to, provided you have enough skill points. So that's really cool. There's also like just other modifiers on top of them where you have like, each class has like an identity gauge. One, like the mage class has like a skill where she can cast faster by infusing herself with magical energy. I talked about the gunner, the gunslinger, and Deadeye having their own stance skills. Gun Lancer has like a taunt skill. I do like
that they have actual like gameplay mechanics rather than just being purely flavor.
Yeah,
like each one has a different way that you play it. I mean, maybe that seems obvious, but there have been some games where it's really just kind of like the flavor of the class, but what you actually execute is more or less the same. So I'm glad that doesn't seem to be the case here.
Yeah, and for people who are interested in PvP in MMOs, this is like a really good game for the PvP community, and there's already been a lot of like PvP startups and ongoing tournaments for this game in other regions, because once you hit level 26, which is like just a few hours of the game, and you unlock PvP, and all you want to do in the game is PvP, then you're set for life, because once you unlock PvP, everything is standardized in PvP. It doesn't take into account your current level or your current gear. Everything is standardized. All the skill points that you want is already available, and you can like customize your own like PvP set build and then go to town. And because all the skills have been tuned for PvP as well, so each skill has a PvE and PvP like stat spread.
So it ends up becoming more about build, craft, and skill rather than just prepping with like did you grind out the gear, which is how it should be.
I played for 1,000 hours, so
you just get to look more. I just assume you get to look more badass. Like, yes, our skills are normalized, but I earned this whatever skin that I get to wear.
Right, exactly.
Or aura. I probably had enough blue crystals for this other cash shop. I'm just kidding.
I mean, look, there's some really cool, like some of the cooler things in the game. Like you don't have to buy from the cash shop. Like my friend completed an island. He got a fucking Velociraptor as a mount now. I'm like, where the fuck did you get that? He's like, I don't know. I just did shit. I can't even remember anymore. Like fuck. It's I'll be playing it for a while. I'll probably talk about it again and again in the podcast. Like more thoughts.
Obviously, my final thoughts. Go ahead. I think I was going to say some of the same stuff. Go ahead.
My final first impressions for now is like it's really, really good. It's worth checking out if it even looks a smidge interesting to you, and see if it's a game that like you'll enjoy. Like just it's free, give it a shot. It's has some of the most easy to understand things once you look into them. Like it's like, oh, this is how these things work. That's a really neat, smart idea. It has a lot of things like that in the game, and it's very flashy.
It seems like it has a lot of convenience both built in and optional. Like it seems like it's a game that respects your time, especially with the way it does with its power packs and things like that.
Yeah, I feel like I understand the trepidation, and everyone's like, well, yeah, it has huge launch numbers, but we'll stick around. But it's like, at this point, if even 10% of the people that are playing now continue playing 6 months from now, that's 130,000 concurrent players.
Right.
That would still be a very healthy population for a Western version of a Korean MMO.
Yep.
Yeah. So any final first impressions, James Chow?
I'm not at endgame yet, but I'm excited to hopefully be able to talk about it next week. It's I'm having a blast with this, and some of my buddies that are hardcore 14 raiders have been having a good time with the Guardian raid so far themselves. So,
dude, before we scale, Guardian raids are exactly like fucking Monster Hunter. Just a very quick rundown. When you get into a Guardian raid with 3 other players, you're set on this map. You don't know where the monster is. You have to fire off a signal flare, which is kind of like a paintball in old Monster Hunter.
And like, you can only have 3 feints.
Yep. So how this works is like there's like the carding system, and it's like it'll allow you to die 3 times. It's not an instant game or the game over the 3rd death, but after you expend those 3 revives, no one else can revive for the whole mission. So that's like kind of like third strike. This is your final chance to do not die. And when you approach the monster, it has no health bar, just like Monster Hunter. It'll have a stagger animations, and then if it gets weak, it has a limping animation, and a lot of them sure do look like Monster Hunter monsters. I won't spoil their design or like what they reminded me of here, because I'm sure
James if you're gonna emulate them the best, I guess.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, it's very clear. Like Monster Hunter is one thing, because hell, there's like animations for the Gun Lancer that are like, I know this animation from Monster Hunter.
Yep.
Like the uppercut into a shelling. It's like that's just straight up your triangle plus circle, like basic ass rotation in Monster Hunter.
Well, once you see some of these monster animations, you're like, I'm really excited for you to check out Guardian raids, and James, you'll get a kick out of it. I was highly amused. I was like, I knew this was kind of like Monster Hunter, but I had no idea to what extent it would be like Monster Hunter, and it sure is Monster Hunter, but as an isometric action RPG perspective.
Yeah, I'm sure sold on the game.
Oh,
sorry.
What was that, Chow?
Oh yeah, I'm sold on the game for sure. The only thing that doesn't catch my interest right now is just the storyline. I just feel it's kind of disjointed, and it's
how early on are you in?
I'm at the siege area, technically, the Lutaria.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Well, have you actually gone to the proper siege, or are you?
Oh, I've seen the siege.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
The transition and all the scenes are epic as hell, but I'm just like not totally sold on the story. A lot of the characters don't really have a lot of dialogue.
I'm not going to tell you the story is amazing. I'm not here to tell you that, because for me, I kind of skipped through most of the story, and like I barely know what the fuck is happening. I just know there's some cool set pieces in there, and there's some cool environments and locations that you'll see. But like, I'm not here to vouch for the story. I'm here to vouch for
the gameplay.
Yeah, the gameplay and like the progression.
I'm totally sold on the gameplay, but the storyline is just like, it's like it just feels like, oh, this is cool. Just throw this in. It's like, okay,
this game, like it definitely, like how we mentioned, like how Guardian raids are influenced by Monster Hunter. Like there are definitely areas that's like, oh, this is the Final Fantasy VII area. This is clearly inspired by Final Fantasy VII. There's
like the area I'm in where you literally shrink down to be in this one village. It's like, oh, hey, Final Fantasy 3. Like literally.
Yeah.
I mean, you can definitely tell that Smilegate are wearing their inspirations on their sleeve. They're not even trying to hide it.
And they're not ashamed of it.
Yeah, and that's fine, because for me, I get a kick out of it. I'm just like, yeah, go for it.
Even their mobile game has some kind of similar references, like if you're playing Epic 7, you're going from like old school fantasy, then all of a sudden this land has robots and all this stuff, and everyone's like wondering, what the hell? They were robots? It's like, okay.
So I'm sure we'll get plenty more opportunities to talk about Lost Ark. It's hard not to just immediately, unpack this giant MMO that's been going for a few years now. So I'm sure we'll be revisiting this in the upcoming podcast, especially as James and Chow get deeper into it and maybe other people start. But I do want to actually take some time to kind of go back to a previous topic that we introduced before going into the Lost Ark, and that is about the Elden Ring previews. So not only were we able to have Amy take a look at the game early with the 6-hour access, but Alex as well, who has now thankfully joined us, has had a chance to go hands-on alongside. So now we've had a few people on the site that's had a chance to play Elden Ring with a few different contexts, with the stress test from late last year and then with the preview test now. So Alex, you can kind of go ahead and tell us what your experience has been with with your most recent preview access to Elden Ring.
Well, where to begin, and I'm also just like racking my brain to make sure I don't say anything I'm not supposed to say. Yeah, I thought I'd swing by, sort of palmed the baby off for a little bit, even though I'm supposed to have her tonight, in order to come and talk about this, just because I know there were some people saying in Twitter replies and stuff, looking forward to hearing you talk about it on the podcast, and I knew Amy wouldn't be on, and I knew you guys hadn't done the hands-on, so I was like, better try and show up at least for a little while. So I obviously had played probably about 10 hours of the closed network test. So I made a point to sort of try and do different things. So I'll run you down, like, the game starts, there's an opening movie. Oh, as far as, I'm not going to talk about any bosses, I'm not going to talk about any specific story beats. I might sort of touch on some side quests that I found, but I am going to talk about locations. So if you're super sensitive to that, fast forward a bit, I guess. I'm sure
we'll have timestamps. So
yeah, I'm sure someone will timestamp when I'm done. But I am going to talk about locations, because I feel like that's the thing that we can talk about from this hands-on without getting into what I would call sensitive spoilers. But I will, right up the top here, just talk about how the game opens. So the game opens much the same as many of the Dark Souls games. So there's a cutscene, and then you spawn in a location, and you encounter a really powerful enemy that you totally fight, and there's one of the missed doors. I don't know if they've got a formal name, that you can't go through until the enemy's defeated, but obviously the enemy just crushes you, which always raises an interesting question, right? Of what happens if you defeat that enemy?
yeah,
if you're
you
that
just get
person
good.
who has perfect parry and stuff and grinds that enemy down. But then basically you die, and after that, that is the point at which the closed network test started, where you sort of wake up in that cave, and you have the Cave of Knowledge, which is basically the tutorial area, and you make your way out of the Cave of Knowledge, open the big double doors in that classic Souls animation, and you're in the open world. Specifically, you're in the area called Lingrave. So I basically decided I know where the game wants you to go. It wants you to go up Storm Hill and up to Stormvale Castle, and to fight Market the Fell. So I was like, I'm not going to do that, because I did that in the closed network test. I'm just going to pick the opposite direction and go as far as I can go.
I'm imagining you like crossing your arms Pingu style and be like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm going this way.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, it's, we want to see, new stuff, right? So I got to the bonfire, the site of grace that's at the bottom of Storm Hill, and then obviously Storm Hill is to the north, Stormvale Castle is to the north, and once you go into the castle, you have to fight against Market the Fell, and that leads into the castle itself. I was like, right, I'm not going there, I'm going south. So I went south. All the invisible walls are gone, obviously, in this build, because it's basically a final build of the game, very close to final. And yeah, I mean, truly, you can go anywhere. I think that's the headline, right? Is that this is truly an open game. And I think we talk about open world games a lot, right? And if you think about Grand Theft Auto, the prototypical open world game, you think about GTA 3, the template that's set for every GTA game since, and many other games in many other genres. The world is open and you can go anywhere, but the story missions play out in a specific order. Sometimes you have a bit of choice about which mission you undertake first, but basically you're doing things in this set order, right? The impression...
my immediate comparison is not Grand Theft Auto, but Skyrim, where people want that sandbox experience. They don't want to just follow the railroad tracks, which does just go in a specific order. So they end up just putting off the story for forever and ever and ever.
Well, yeah, but also in Skyrim, that's got, this core narrative that you could do in maybe 6 hours. Now, it's hard to tell, but I'm under the impression that Elden Ring has sort of open-ended progression. So there were things that happen, and they happened to me at different points that they happened to other people.
Huh.
So other people would defeat a boss, for instance, and then the next time they rested at a site of grace, the handmaiden character would appear and would introduce a new mechanic and give you something new, or whatever, or introduce you to a new location. But the trigger for that is not
fixed.
necessarily defeating that boss, because someone I know unlocked that by defeating Margit the Fell, the boss that was in the closed network test. But people I know unlocked that by, quite literally just noodling around, which is how it happened to me. Eventually, I was just exploring, and at some point I rested, and she just appeared and said, "Hey, I'm going to take you to Round Table Hold." Round Table Hold is a whole other thing to discuss, because that is it's almost like your Firelink Shrine. So
What you're saying is this is going to be a nightmare to guide.
Oh yeah. But like
this is the worst comparison. I'm going to make it anyways. It sounds like some Saga games where different things you do have like different point values, and like it doesn't matter what
and
you
it's
do
pushing
exactly.
you through this threshold. Yeah.
But once you like reach like a certain like you've done enough things or points, like then some event might happen. So
like I don't know
That's
what
what
it
it reminded me of.
Roll with it.
Being introduced to Round Table Hold, right? Or a different character showing up at the bonfires. These are major events. Round Table Hold, by the way, is basically like I said, like your Firelink Shrine. So it's a no combat zone that's full of it, not full of, don't get the wrong idea, it's not like heaving, but there are quite a lot of other NPCs who are also tarnished like you, who sell different things, have interesting story things to say. There's a blacksmith type guy there. Although it's interesting because obviously in the core Souls games, those locations were the only place you would go to do your weapon upgrades, for instance. Whereas here, you have this location that you can teleport to from any of the sites of grace because it's sort of off the map. But also, there are places you can do that stuff yourself around the world. So it's interesting, although I'm sure it's probably the case that he can do exclusive stuff and things. So yeah, so anyway, I went south, discovered a different castle, discovered a different side quest where I was asked to met a woman on the path to the castle, and she basically said the castle had fallen and her father was still there. She wanted me to find her father. Went to the castle, found the father. He wouldn't leave the castle without a sword, but the sword was in the hands of the boss. You see how that stuff goes. But the thing is, that castle was just like deep south on the map, completely disconnected, and in completely the opposite direction that the game's story was pushing you. And,
so like you went to this castle pretty early, but in someone else's playthrough of the game, they might stumble across this castle dozens of hours later, possibly.
Yeah, or perhaps not at all. And it's that's, you mentioned Skyrim. That's probably the closest comparison in the sense of you sort of have that moment of once you, or for me, I always think of Oblivion because that's my favorite one. So when I think of coming out of the prison in Oblivion and the world opens up in front of you, and at that point you can do whatever you want. And that is totally what this is. But the interesting thing is, it felt to me in these 6 hours, which it's only 6 hours, like the story was progressing and like things were happening, even though I was just noodling around. I wasn't even fighting that many bosses because I was determined to see as much of the world as possible. So I would sort of hit a boss and teleport to a different site of grace and go in a different unseen
You
direction.
didn't want to spend part of your 6 hours doing like the death marathon against a boss.
If you've only got 6 hours, you don't want to spend an hour and a half of that bouncing off one boss, right? So, and there's other areas I went to. There's an area like east of the point I'm talking about at the bottom of Stormhill where I think it's called Caelid, and as you approach it, it's got that cool effect. This is going to be a really weird comparison, but you know how like on the overworld map in Final Fantasy VII, as you approach Cosmo Canyon, it goes to sort of that late evening, like golden hour sort of time. And lots of games do that, right? I've seen there's some Zelda games that have done that in the past and stuff too. But basically, as you approach this area, Caelid, the sky just goes like red, like blood red, and the whole area is bathed in this blood red color. And Caelid is sort of at the top of a hill, and then as you go down the hill, there's a great big like blood swamp, which is poisonous when you step on it. There's another big castle which I couldn't get anywhere near because even on my horse I was getting like hit with massive explosive arrows that were coming from cannons or like ogres with bows and arrows. I couldn't quite tell. So yeah, and then the other thing that I think is super cool is so then right towards the end of the hands-on, I went. So there's two cool things that I did towards the end, but one of the cool things was I went up towards Stormvale Castle, and I remembered in the hands-on there was sort of a path around the side of the castle that was blocked by the invisible walls. So I took that path, and lo and behold, if you mess around there enough and look closely enough, you will find a path that just climbs up and around behind the castle and spits you out exactly where the castle would spit you out if you went through and beat all the bosses and stuff in the castle.
Is this
So
like
it's
an
like,
intentional
there's-
thing or like a sequence break
Yeah,
thing?
this isn't like breaking, jumping up a cliff or something. This is a deliberate path that's well hidden. There's this sequence break that's just there for you to find. Now, what I don't know at this stage is Storm Vale Castle a mandatory piece of progression for the game? So do you
Like,
have to go there?
at any point is it gonna like cordon you back and saying, hey, I know you skipped this
You've got
before,
to go
but
and
you gotta
defeat that
go
lord.
in.
Yeah, maybe. But I think the thing that I found really interesting and really exciting is that path is there, and I was able to go around, get to this area that clearly I wasn't powerful enough to be in. And the story doesn't let up in that sense. Like, you start finding NPCs who start talking about interesting locations. So it's like this area beyond to the north of the castle, there was a guy who was talking about like a mage's academy, and something had gone down at the mage's academy while he was out in the wilds, and he couldn't get back in because the doors had all been sealed. And it's like, okay, so you're going to go to that academy and something real fucked up's going to have happened. But yeah, like, and if that, I don't know, is that a story location? Is that just side content? Who knows? And that's the amazing thing about it. It's truly, truly open in that regard. And it just feels, yeah, I mean, Josh touched on it. One of the things running through my mind when I was playing it was like, oh God, this is going to be a nightmare to guide. Because you truly can go anywhere.
Yeah,
and
so
do anything.
it doesn't actually like spell out for you like, hey, this is like the next story location, or it doesn't like give you like a pushing like or guiding hand of like, hey, go to this location next that's like vital to the quote unquote story.
It's sort of clear when you first come out into Limgrave that there's like a quite linear set of bonfires where it's like you find one,
Yeah,
then the
I
other,
remember
then the
that for
other.
the close nectar task. Yeah.
Third one of those bonfires, obviously the one that's at the base of Storm Hill, and that's the one also where when you rest at it, you get given the horse.
Yeah.
Although this is the thing I'm curious about. I assume if you go off to other bonfires, eventually the horse will just trigger the same way other things did for me.
Oh.
I imagine. But yeah, but when you are there, what's she called? The handmaiden, finger maiden, something like that. She does sort of say to you, Stormvale Castle is to the north. You should go there next.
Yeah.
But that's about it. It's like there's no quest markers in the traditional sense. It's like if you find an NPC who talks about a location where and sort of gives you intrigue, a reason to go to a location. That location does get marked on your map, but not like in a flashing icon, here's a side quest wage. Just like, oh, that cave that was talked about is here, by the way, if you fancy going to it.
I think that's a nice compromise. It's not like waypointed where it's like, here's the Mages Guild right here, waypoint, go. But it's like, here it is on the map.
And you
here
can,
to the east or whatever.
You can drop a pin, obviously, then on that location and make a beeline to it. But that's up to you, right?
That aspect, yeah.
It is, but obviously Breath of the Wild still had a traditional quest log where it was like quest started.
It's not a quest log, but for the actual like map making aspect of it, you can definitely make your map the way you wanted it to be.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and the size of the world and the how varied the world is. I discovered like a mausoleum, and it had an elevator in it. And I got the impression this elevator was something a bit different because the Souls elevators are always like great big platforms with chains and stuff. And this looked like an Souls elevator, lots of like runes glowing the moment you step on it, that sort of stuff. And it goes down. Obviously, as it goes down, it's hiding a load because there's no load screens in this game. But when it goes down, like I'm expecting it to just lure me into a dungeon, and it lowers me into like a great big underground river that is running under a huge swathe of the map. And it's like, this opens up in front of you and you're like, holy shit, like this is just here. and it's inside this tiny mausoleum building that is in a semi-significant location, but it's not. You could easily miss it. And again, this is a place
since
found.
it's like lower on the map, it's not obvious where it's like this is here, because the map just shows what's ever on the surface level. I assume.
Yeah, the map doesn't even appear for that area until you find it, and then when you find it, you open the map and go, "Oh, this is running under the map." And actually, the enemies down there were super powerful, even though I found it by just traveling a little bit south east of the starting point.
So that's when you would take one of your map markers and be like, "All right, come back later."
Yeah, but I sort of rode through it on my horse. I died a couple of times doing it, but I wanted to see what was at the other end of this great big underground river. And when I reached the other end, there's another elevator that presumably, once you activate it from the other end, is connected to another piece of the map on the other side of the game world, because it runs underneath. Yeah, it's cool. It's really cool.
I can't wait for someone to just accidentally somehow, some way, just stumble into the final area and defeat the final boss, and like just sees credits like 2 hours into the game. It's like, oh, I guess that's a game. That's it.
I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen. I can't wait to see the
40-minute speed run, or even less than that,
to see the speed runs and see people working it out.
They've got their broomstick. They've got their like. They never get hit because they're god tier players, so they don't need armor.
I really can't wait. Yeah, I really can't wait to speed into this game. Like, just having a dedicated jump button just really opens the game up in terms of the speed running, and just like what sort of weird out of bounds tricks they're gonna find.
I mean, I think it's bonkers, and I think it's just so free flowing, and who knows. But if you're asking me for my bet, I bet that this game has maybe 1 or 2 points where you have to defeat a certain boss or a boss of a certain type. But other than that, I bet it's just like, do whatever you want. That's my guess. That's the feeling it gave me.
And even if it ends up not being the case, even if it ends up like once people like map it out and kind of like back calculate like Adam's point thing, or however it ends up working like under the hood, even if it ends up being the case where there is a little bit more order than you might realize, if it's obfuscated enough where you never realize that, or you never glean that unless you like really dive into it, I think that's also just as valid, where as long as it gives the impression that you were able to do whatever you want, whatever order you wanted, regardless of how the mechanisms worked underneath. I think that's still an accomplishment in my mind.
That's the most exciting period of a Souls game in general. Like the first few weeks of like no one knows anything about this game coming out. It's like, what the fuck is happening? Like, what is affecting what? That's all. Like the discovery period of Souls games are always, in my opinion, like the best time to play them.
Well, then also it's kind of, you almost have the opposite thing where people might realize, or like Alex's little accidental skip that he did at the castle, where you might learn, like, did you realize that this is actually optional? Like, I'm imagining when Dark Souls 1 came out and people were doing the what's the younger prince that you fight underneath at the very bottom of in Orlando, like people might have thought he was required because he's got like a big storyline leading up to him, but he's like, nope, he's actually completely optional. Or did you know you never had to do this because you could just take this back path and never have to step foot? I almost think that's also interesting.
There's going to be a lot more of that.
Yeah. And this sort of has like that emergent storytelling where everyone's individual narrative that they piece together in their playthrough is going to be completely different just based on the choices they made, or whether or not they get to this underground river and turn back and say, I'm going to go back when they're stronger, or they just go get on their horse, like Alex said, and like, I want to see what's on the other side. However weak I am, be damned.
And yet, I think despite all this, it's probably in some way, the easiest and least obtuse of the Souls games compared to Dark Souls, and I'll tell you for why. For one, just to talk about easier, I don't think it's easier in terms of the difficulty of combat and stuff like that, but because it's a go anywhere game. I was talking to Mike about this because Mike, the tech guy on RPG site, has tried Souls and bounced off it because he just couldn't get on with how those games are. And we were talking about Elden Ring, and I was saying, the thing is, if you get to a boss and you find it really difficult and you're stuck on it, you can just teleport to another site base, pick a direction you've never been in, and go and explore something else. And then later on, when you're stronger, you can loop back if you want. And that is obviously in Souls, you could teleport to an old area, but what you were really faced with, apart from those few times when it had the branching stuff, like optional areas like the lava-y bit of DS3 and things like that, your only option was to just grind on skeletons and shitty NPCs, or maybe cheese out
there were
dragons.
funnel points where eventually it's like you got to beat this guy. I'm sure they
Yeah,
exist in Elden Ring, but it seems like far fewer and far more spread apart.
I'm not massively convinced they will exist in Elden Ring, but even if they do, you can teleport away, and there's more to do. Like I say, if you hit a boss in Dark Souls, broadly speaking, your option is to go away and grind. And what are you going to grind? Content you've already seen.
Mm-hmm.
Regular enemies you've already seen. Find the dragon and cheese the dragon with ranged attacks or whatever because it's worth more souls. That sort of stuff. In this game, you can truly just uproots and go, you know what? Screw this boss. I'm going to teleport back to somewhere miles away and go in a completely different direction. But just by the merit of exploring, you're going to gain a bunch of souls and be able to level up and perhaps find some new gear, whatever. So that's the point where I think it makes it easier. And then to the point of being less obtuse, I just think having a map in the way it's got a map and being able to drop down waypoints and stuff like that, it just feels a little bit less you're on your own, even though you definitely feel like you're on your own still, if that makes sense. And yeah, and also when the story stuff happens, when characters are talking to you, it feels a bit more confident in how it's delivering that story. I think probably more of this, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of lore hidden in item descriptions and stuff like that, but also it felt like I was being fed more lore directly as well.
Maybe it felt a little bit more actually like grounded rather than like the Dark Souls 2, where they're just like, let's be as vague as possible and hopefully you glean something amazing out of it or something like that.
I think the biggest learning curve for me after playing the closed network test of Elden Ring is that adapting to the encounter philosophy in the game, that now that you do have a dedicated jump button, like making use of that button in combat, because I played Souls games, I never had that option like in those games to like really think about, and it's like, oh, okay, I really have to start looking out for like sweeps and whatnot, and like
shockwaves.
Yeah, like the closest thing like Sekiro in that sense, where you do have that option of like, okay, they're about to do a sweep, or you have to like Mikiri counter into them.
Yeah, Sekiro is the one like gap in my Souls-ish, what do you call it, history. Like, that's the one game I skipped. So
the one thing I will say is when you're fighting the soldiers anyway, and an interesting thing, I saw more NPCs fighting each other in this 6 hours than I think I've seen, generally speaking, in any of the other Souls games.
Interesting.
Because there are totally factions.
Mm-hmm.
It's like in that castle that I talked about that was under, that was to the south, that was under siege, that appeared to be a big chunky side area. Inside, there are still some of the. I say inside. I don't want to set false expectations. This castle doesn't really have an interior because it's starting to crumble away through the destruction of the fighting. But there's sort of different levels you can go, and you can climb up onto the parapet. Anyway, in there are still some of the soldiers, some of the knights, and they're sort of fighting these creatures and the twisted husk people that have.
I do remember in the test that they were like these big giant enemies. I don't know if they were golems or fleshy enemies. They're like fighting off like wolf facts and other sorts of creatures in that area of them. I do recall that.
Yeah, I've definitely seen more of that than I saw in Souls. But my point is, anyway, with the soldier enemies and stuff like that, where there's distractions, stealth feels more viable. Like you feel a little bit of the Sekiro vibe in terms of being able to hide in tall grass and pop out and backstab someone. The AI is obviously, I will say, that's one of the things where you're like, oh yeah, this is still a Souls game in the sense that I was just hiding off to the corner watching these two factions of enemies fight. And one of them defeated, he was sort of one-on-one with one of the other enemies, and he defeated it, and then two of his allies were getting like just battered behind him, but he had spotted me, so he made a beeline for me, and I was like, man, like in a game with more robust AI, he would have gone to help his friends, but that's not really what these games are about, so I get it.
Yeah.
So I guess one of my questions I have for you before we wrap this up is saw during a lot of when people were sharing from the closed network test, like how the magic system works and how it seems like I remember Dark Souls 1 had a lot of broken, and I think 2 as well, especially like the lightning magic was completely like overtuned, and then eventually it was like nerfed down to nothing in the later series of the games. But then it seems like in Elden Ring and a lot of the marketing for it, they've really pushed like these cool like specter ghosts that you get to ally with you, these giant like magical armaments that you get. Did you mess much with magical weapons, or like I guess I'll just ask more generically, like what sort of combat style did you end up going with?
So I was mostly, I did a little bit of bow and arrow work, and mostly I am very much a traditional sort of longsword and small shield sort of guy. But although I'm finding the shield pretty useless in Elden Ring, so I think in my actual playthrough, I think I'm going to ditch the shield. But I love summoning in these games, and obviously you've got the summons that are available. So one thing that I will say, if you played the closed network test, it's way harder to get hold of summons, because they were clearly just placed at those shops in the network test for the sake of the network test. They clearly just moved them there. I can certainly speak to the one that was the wolves in the network test. I obtained that in a completely different way. It wasn't in the shop where it was.
Oh, okay.
So the balance of all that is slightly different in the final game. I found a summon that was, I don't know if it was in the network test because I didn't get it in the network test, but I found a summon that was a jellyfish that sort of shoots
Hell yeah.
shoots ranged stuff at bosses from afar, and it's actually really cool because you can aggro the boss and up close and keep them engaged while this thing is quite far away and just keeps firing projectiles that whittles away their health. So that's cool.
I have to have a panda summon. That'd be great. I love pandas.
But I did fight a giant bear and it killed me straight away.
Hell yeah.
Like a huge bear that was like 12 feet tall. I think they released a screenshot with one of those bears in it. But that does not prepare you for the size of it in the game. You just go like, ooh, because you're on your horse and you feel quite large, and then it's like, double or perhaps.
I played Yakuza 5. I can handle big bears. I think I'm ready.
I think people actually found that bear in the network test with the out of bounds glitch.
Because they are in the forest in Lingrave. So yeah, if people were managed to get out of bounds, I didn't see any of that. So that's interesting. I love out of bounds glitches. Like, I spent many hours watching many out of bounds stuff on FF15. That's like the out of bounds king because they just built a huge world and then not used any of it. But yeah, I mean, it's to come back to the magic point. It feels like in general there's more to enjoy in terms of class customization. More things are viable in this game, it feels like. But yeah, it does seem like magic's going to be quite an expensive path to go down, but I think it's probably pretty powerful. But I personally I've never been a Souls mage because I'm just not good at keeping the distance between me.
The only time that I got into it was I'm racking my brain whether it was one or two. It's whatever game like the lightning spear magic was completely overpowered. So that was the only time I did magic was when it was like any baby could do this and win. So I've never really done it when you really have to like commit to it and get like actual strategy or technique. So for Elden Ring, I'm kind of like, depending on how like expensive or hard to get into it, like I don't want to just be the guy that just says like I'm gonna do I'm very much like you. Like I played Dark Souls 1, Sword and Shield, never parried, never dodged, just block, heavy armor. I think I wore Havel's armor most of the way. So I'm gonna try to like get out of my comfort zone and be like, don't be the heavy armor stocky dude. Be like a mage or something. So that's my aspiration for myself right now. We'll see if I'm able to stick to that.
Yeah, I'm quite curious to sort of. The problem is with the way I spec, I don't end up with very much. It's SP, isn't it? I think in these games, I can't remember, but I don't end up with very much magic juice. So it means I summon in a fight and then I can't do anything else.
I'm also a coward. I always summon like the NPC help.
My
'Cause usually
imagery
there's, like-
for
Go ahead.
yeah, my imagery for your plan, Brian, of like your aspirations and hopes is like I'm thinking of like you have like this your standard wizard mage build, and then you slowly anamorphs it back into a tank. It's a literal tank.
What if I'm a mage? Oh, I'm too squishy. What if I'm a mage with armor? Or what if instead of a staff I
Exactly.
use a sword?
What if I'm a mage with a sword? What if I'm a mage without magic? Wait.
Oh, damn it. No, but yeah, it was awesome to hear your take on it, because we had before we had jumped on, we had obviously given a shout out to Amy's preview feature, and James and Josh had gone through with the network test, and we also talked a little bit about, and maybe you can speak to this a tiny bit about was this done through like Bandai Namco's like remote cloud access? Or how did you get access to it?
I don't need to get too inside baseball here, but they use there's lots of different apps that have sort of come up over the years of the pandemic for us to that publishers like to use to give us hands-on without having to get us to the office or give us a copy of a game. And I think with Elden Ring, they're obviously super concerned about leaks, and they've also got this, like, crazy netcode thing going on, right? This vulnerability that they're trying to fix.
Right.
So basically, it was installed on Steam on a PC in Bandai Namco's offices, and then I used an app called Shadow to dial into that PC at a designated time. And Shadow's like a team viewer or a parsec, basically like a Stadia or xCloud style thing, to dial into that PC and play live. What I will say is Shadow is sick. It's really good. Like, I mean, I have gigabit internet, so that obviously helps, but I was having zero lag. It felt really steady. It was one of those cloud experiences where it was very difficult to even tell that I was playing over the cloud, apart from some very light visual artifacting and hints.
So Adam had introduced the cloud playing, and then George Foster actually did it with Bandai Namco earlier with Tales, and I believe
yes. Yeah.
One of the other games.
Scarlet.
So, but I don't. Yeah, Scarlet Nexus, and then I don't think any of the rest of us have done it. Oh, James, have you done it? I forgot.
Yeah, for the Endwalker preview, it was through Parsec.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so Square uses Parsec. I played Final Fantasy Origin, Stranger in Paradise through Parsec. That was a really laggy session. It was not good.
Yeah, I think with Square, well, I don't know if we can actually.
I will say this, right? Because it's always difficult to know what to say. But this is nothing that I wouldn't say directly to PR or marketing or whoever as feedback.
It is dumb that they force us to connect through Parsec to servers back in Japan.
So I don't know that was the case for. I don't know that was the case for. I'm pretty sure the Stranger. In fact, I know the Stranger Paradise demo I played was running at the London office, and I'm obviously in the UK. But what I would say is the thing that I really want to. And again, this is nothing I wouldn't say to PR, but the thing I want to shout out Bandai Namco for is they're quite chill about this stuff. So it's like. For Final Fantasy Origin, it was like we had to connect to a PC through Parsec to play the game, but then also we had to be in a special Discord server, and they used this Discord server to like give us a preamble about the game before we played it, show us some cutscenes. Like they used the Discord stream share to show us those, and then that barely worked and was lagging like crazy.
Oh yeah.
And then to sort of monitor what we were doing and make sure we weren't getting into difficulties or whatever, we then had to stream the game back to them through Discord screenshot or something like that. But basically our gameplay had to be in like a Discord chat with the screenshot. And it's just like, it's fine, it works, but credit to Bandai Namco for both the Tales hands-on and this, and even the Cyberpunk hands-on, where they were super skittish about Cyberpunk, which Cyberpunk was through Parsec, not through Shadow. But in all three cases, Bandai Namco were like, right, you have a slot to dial into this PC. So mine was between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. on a designated day. And it was basically, we're not watching. Maybe someone was in that room just keeping an eye, making sure none of them had crashed. But like, It wasn't like I had to be in a Slack server or a Discord server or anything like that. It wasn't like I had someone peering over my shoulder and checking I'm okay every 5 minutes. It was just like, here's a review guide. Here's a couple of videos of things you might want to know. The review guide, preview guide has a bunch of stuff in it about like things you might need to know, recommended directions that maybe the developers think you should check out, things like that. Some strategies for some of the bosses you might get stuck on. But basically, they send you all that in an email before your slot, and they're just like, do what you want. And I highly appreciate that because, like,
credit where credit's due. I can understand the more heavy hands-on approach that Square did for the Endwalker preview event, because it's like, it's an MMO. You have a bunch of people there. It's like,
yeah,
it makes sense.
I think what Square wants to do, really, and there's other companies that are the same. Nintendo, in the UK at least, is quite similar. I think what they want to do, really, is they want to try to replicate the physical press tour experience. So it's like, by having a Discord server, that's almost like your event space. That means the producer of the game or the director of the game or whoever can speak to you all before you start, or the PR or whatever. And then you go off into separate breakout rooms for roundtable interviews, or you get your hands on and you've got a chaperone to look after you and all that sort of stuff. And I get it. But I will say, for the work from home variant of previews, I do appreciate what companies like Capcom and Namco have done, where in Capcom's case with like Monster Hunter Rise on PC, and actually the Switch version, right? It was just like, here's a code, here's the restrictions, please don't spoil the game, go for it. And in the case
they did
of Namco,
also offer like a Discord server just so you can like communicate for like matchmaking. Though,
yeah, but that's a bit different too.
Yeah,
there's
and
nothing
also,
worse. There's nothing worse than being in a preview. I'm not going to name the game here because I feel like it's a bit mean, but there was a game where I went for a hands-on. The last Gamescom I went to, so what year was the Bandit? So like 2019 Gamescom, and it was in a hotel room, and I literally, they invite me to go and play this game in this hotel room. I was not quite sure why this game was in a hotel room, because the publisher had a massive Gamescom booth and a massive Gamescom business stand. But for some reason, this demo was in a hotel room. So you turn up to the hotel room and it's like PR. There's like the regional PR that you know. There's like the higher level PR. And then there's like 2 or 3 devs. And they all just sat behind me and watched me play this game for half an hour.
Oh man,
it's like
cringy and
then when I finished the
awkward.
demo, this was the worst thing. When I finished the demo, they clapped. And I was just, the thing is, I didn't. And the thing is, I didn't. This was a big AAA game, and the problem was then all around me, bright-eyed, going, "What did you think? What did you think?" And the truth is, I didn't think it was that good. But obviously, then you go, "Yeah, it's cool. I really like." And then you pick up the things you like, right? You go, "I really liked this, and I really like this," and you don't talk about the 10 things you want to shit on. And I feel like the really hands-on approach to long distance events sometimes feels a bit like that, when you've got someone watching your progress on the Discord server, and then if you get stuck on a boss or something, they send you a DM going, "Are you okay?" It's like, want to help, I'll ask for it. So I really appreciate, credit where it's due. I really appreciate Bandai Namco's approach with both Tales and this, and even actually also with Cyberpunk, which obviously to an extent that was also
Bandai Namco UK that kind of like distributed Cyberpunk there, right?
Yes, and it's
elsewhere. Bandai Namco is not really attached to Cyberpunk, but it is there.
Okay. I think they also publish it. I think they publish it in more territories than Warner does. I think Bandai also publishes it in Asia and stuff.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I think that's
I think the US is a separate case, but Bandai is the main publisher outside of North America. But either way, they had a Slack server that just in case you needed technical support, but again, they just left you alone to play for 10 hours or whatever.
I'm gonna start doing that. I'm gonna start like after someone streams in like the staff Discord, I'm just gonna start clapping after the end of stream.
that was honestly one of the worst demos of my career, because the game was fine, but you can feel their eyes boring into the back of your head the whole time you're playing. And I'm not super sensitive to this. It's different. It's because it's this intimate setting, but it's like when I played Final Fantasy VII Remake for the first time outside of the demo, a demo, and then they had an event where you could play chapter 2, so the stuff where you're running around on the upper side of the plate and fighting all the soldiers, and then you could play whatever chapter it is when you do the Mako Reactor 5 mission. And when I was playing that, at one point, Kitase-san just walked up behind me and watched me play for a bit. And I didn't feel weird about that, but it's the whole thing of when it's like a hotel room and it's a bunch of people just staring at the back of your head. It's like, man.
Yeah.
Man.
I went to a Persona 5 Royal event, and they had some of the like Atlas, like none of the Japanese creators, but they had like the Atlas USA people there. But it was, it was different because there was like 12 of us in a room at like desks, and they had some of the Atlas guys just kind of roaming around a bit, so that wasn't that awkward. But when it's like just you in a hotel room and like 5 people, like PR or whatnot, it's just that's kind of weird, very weird, so very awkward. I'm actually like cringing here from a distance.
Adam had obviously introduced the fact that Amy had played through the Shadow software, but I'm glad that I brought it back up to Alex because these were some really fun stories.
Yeah, this is a bit of a tangent, but it's fun.
I've got lots of terrible press demo stories. Like just there's so many ones where they've just gone horrifically. I think the worst feeling in the world, right, is when you play a game and I do genuinely think I talked about this week because I actually wrote a preview of. I'm going to say Dark Souls then. I wrote a preview of Elden Ring for VG247.com. In that preview, I said, I'm getting the same sort of feeling in the pit of my stomach about this game. The last time I had it, it was about Breath of the Wild and Hitman 2016, which is pretty high praise. And I do think I've got a pretty good nose for these things. And the absolute worst thing is when you go to a preview and you play something and you're like, this is fucked. Like to pull an example out of thin air, I remember going and having a hands-on with the Thief reboot at E3, and I knew within not even half an hour, within 7 or 8 minutes of starting to play that game, it was going nowhere.
My most similar example of that was Code Vein at E3 like 2018, 17.
That Code Vein E3 demo is so bad that they delayed the game for a year. There was remember that they delayed the whole they delayed the game for the whole year basically because the E3 reaction to it was terrible. Anyway,
no, but thanks for jumping on, Alex, to talk so much about your time with Elden Ring. I think that was really valuable.
I wanted to make sure I hopped on, and definitely, like I said, it's a bit of a weird one for me here this weekend because I'm meant to be having my daughter tonight because I'm going to be up until 3 or 4 in the morning tomorrow watching the Super Bowl. Obviously it happens extremely late here, and so sort of I'm meant to have her tonight because my partner is going to be upstairs sheltering from us.
Before we let you go, Alex, because we still have you here just for a little bit, we might as well talk about a feature that you wrote that is correspond with a certain announced game at the Nintendo.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, we should definitely hit it off, Brian. What was announced at the Nintendo Direct, and what are we talking about?
All right, so we have yet to talk about anything on this podcast about what was announced at the Nintendo Direct, and I wasn't going to bring this up first, but yes, we'll bring it up because this is something that Alex, I didn't know this, but near and dear to him. That is a remaster of a Super Famicom JRPG.
Remake.
Oh, it is a remake because it's the
It's
HD 2D.
It's technically a remake.
All right, it's not split hairs.
It's also voiced.
This is Live Alive, which originally released in 1994 for the Super Famicom, and it is getting remade for the Nintendo Switch in a HD 2D art style, and is releasing this summer on July 22nd. It had not previously released in English officially at all, and I didn't know this, but as you know, within a day of this being announced at the Nintendo Direct, Alex wrote up a preview about this game, basically saying this is why this matters. This is why Live Alive coming to the Nintendo Switch this year, coming west in 2022, is so important. So that's the preamble. So I don't know anything about Live Alive other than some very high level stuff about it having like multiple story threads that are completely independent at first within different contexts, different characters, different settings that eventually tie together. To me, there's a lot of games that have done similar sorts of things, but it seems like Live Alive is kind of like the tent pole or that idea kind of first
So-
was genesis. So yeah, go just take it away, Alex.
Well, I'll just say I haven't played this game for years, and I collect and buy a lot of. Actually, I didn't collect or buy this. I interviewed Yoko Shimomura at some event or another, and at the end of the interview, she was like, "Do you want some CDs?" And she just had a stack of CDs of her work with her, and so I was just like, "Yeah, okay." So she just handed me a stack of CDs, and there was a bunch of games. It was all old stuff. It was like arrangements, there was a Mana arrangement CD that's really good, and some other stuff. And in this, she Parasite Eve? She was, right? So I think there was a Parasite Eve soundtrack in there.
Because she
but
did Parasite Eve, yeah.
But in there was this Live Alive remix CD, and I listened to it and I was like, this is really good. So then I obviously go and play the game. And yeah, it's not like a absolutely perfect game by any means, the original anyway. But the thing I'd just say about it is it's intimately connected, in my opinion, to sort of Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy V, Final Fantasy VI. It's really connected to that golden era of Super Nintendo games. And I think in particular, there's a lot of DNA shared, both in terms of staff and in terms of ideas, between this and Chrono Trigger. And then it's got like a really interesting race combat system and all that sort of stuff. In fact, the thing that was worst about the game was just that it graphically was a bit weak. It came out around the time that Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger came out, but it looked more like Final Fantasy 4 or 5. You know what I mean?
Okay, so it seemed a little bit
this-
dated maybe at the time.
Yeah, it was dated when it released, definitely. So the fact that this is getting a HD 2D remake is addressing the number one thing that was a problem with this game.
Well, the thing I love about the game, it's basically probably why they're going back into it, is the Octopath Traveler, with the gigantic enemy and your sprite is like super tiny.
Look, like
Yeah.
it's one of those. It's like Live Alive jogged, so Octopath could walk, so Live Alive could again run.
Yeah, I mean, definitely Octopath. There's a lot of
What's with this
similarities as
Octopath
well.
slander?
But the
Hey.
difference is, right? That Octopath didn't do the great. In fact, probably the greatest downfall of Octopath was it did not do a good job of eventually bringing those stories together.
Right.
That is what this game does
Octopath
well.
is just
Didn't
basically
somebody-
8 separate stories.
Didn't some of the Octopath developers even say they didn't expect people to do all 8 stories? And it's like, oh, come on.
Of course they're gonna do it.
I didn't say it. Wouldn't surprise me if they said that.
Yeah,
That seems like
that
tone
seems really
deaf
weird.
that-
Yeah,
that some dev would misunderstand. But it's just an excellent game.
yeah, I love it.
and it's really interesting, and I think it's a perfect fit for 2D, for HD 2D. Whereas, for instance, everyone clamours for a Final Fantasy 6 2D HD, either or HD 2D, whatever bloody way around they say it. I noticed that the trailers for this have like a HD 2D logo on the end, so they're clearly Square's trying to make this into a brand now.
Well, now we're up to what, 3? Because
Four, Octopath,
People-
Triangle Strategy, Live Alive, and Dragon Quest 3.
Hey,
Yeah,
maybe
Quest
they
even
might.
has it in the
and obviously
actual title.
Octopath, right, which started it.
Yeah.
But like the whole thing is, I think it's the perfect sort of game. People talk about Final Fantasy VI, and it's like, I think Final Fantasy VI looks pretty good as it is. And I'm actually sort of disappointed that they're doing a few scenes in 2D HD or HD 2D for the pixel
HD
remaster of
2D.
6, because now you're going to have this mismatch. When it goes to the Opera, the game is going to look different. And I didn't like that on the PS1 versions where they used CG, so I don't like it anymore for this. I'd rather they remade games that deserve it, or that are more needing of it, perhaps, because FF6 would deserve it, but I don't think it needs it. So that's thing number one. Thing number two I'll say about this is, I think this getting remade in HD 2D increases the chances of them doing Chrono Trigger astronomically.
I was hoping
Uh,
that they would do a different game. I was hoping they would do Bahamut Lagoon because they're doing Project Triangle Strategy.
that'd be good.
Yeah, Bahamut Lagoon would be really good. I wouldn't want to do Chrono Trigger in this style either. But if they do it, I'd be interested to see it. I just think
feel there's potential.
this game, like Live Alive in general, is like really so special to me as well because of the way it kind of it presents itself very differently from other RPGs in the way that like it depicts like different time periods and the way that their gimmicks are like. That they showed a little bit in the trailer with like how the prehistoric period had like no words, only emojis and like
I love
kind of
how
expressions.
this remake is voice acted, and you can even hear in that
Oh,
little section
let's
that they just
see.
have grunts voiced.
Let's
Yeah.
see if it's all voice acted or if it's
Yeah,
just select
interested.
scenes. Because it wouldn't surprise me if it's not all VO.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wonder
We'll see.
if it is fully
Was
voice acted.
was Octopath all VO?
No, absolutely
Yeah.
not.
So this is the thing.
It's all the story stuff, but not like the side stuff.
The one other thing I'd say is if Nintendo's publishing this, at least in the West,
Yes.
and if they're getting into bed with this in a big way, the thing that I've thought about a few times over the last couple of days is I think they should remake the first two Golden Sun games in HD 2D. This is what I'm talking about.
Camelot's
Where
I
those
think
games-
Mario Golf.
Golden Sun would actually be apt to it because the way it's like like the perspective of battles already, like remember like the Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D.
The Dragon Quest, that Dragon Quest remake battle, like
It looks like Golden Sun.
is Golden Sun.
Yeah,
yeah, it's like
Golden
identical.
So yeah, I think that I'm still for Live Alive. I'm still kind of mixed on like I get it why they had to change the character designer to like it seems like the Octopath person. I forgot their name off the top of my head.
Well,
Like,
it'll be a licensing nightmare.
Yeah,
They have,
it'll be a
like,
licensing.
different
Yeah,
They have, like,
because
different manga.
because in the original one they had like all those publishing ties with Shogakukan, I believe, is the publisher of the original character designs because there were different manga artists for each of the characters in the original Live Alive, and it'd be a nightmare. And I don't know if that was the reason or partially the reason why that never came to the West either. So-
I think it was just late. During that time, there's a lot of games that got skipped during.
Yeah.
No, in terms of Live Alive specifically, actually, Ted Wolsey, the guy who obviously did a lot of the Square translations at the time, is on the record as saying the visuals were a huge detracting factor to that getting localized because it just looked so dated.
Yeah,
You've got to think by the time it came out, like Final Fantasy VI would have been out for a couple of years, and Chrono Trigger was like I think 7 months after it in Japan. So if you think about the Western timeline, and I think that's why it was just like decided we're not going to do this.
It has
And
everything.
for those of us who were in that, who were playing games in that period of time, like I remember companies like that were obsessed over like each new game, how it looked better than the last, or it had new effects or whatever. Like that was like the thing to care about. So I could see how them saying like the visuals aren't as good, we can't release this, because that was people harped on that like all the time.
Sony was big.
So I believe you.
They were like, "Hey, if this game was 2D, we're ditching it. We have to go 3D."
I just want to like know like what was everyone's like first thought when they saw this on stream, like
Well, I was hype about it. You know what the thing I care about the most is the final scenario about this game. It is basically a Final Fantasy 1 scenario that is a parody gone horribly wrong.
it's something. I like if for people who were let down by the way like how Octopath handled its split scenarios, this game lives up to it. Like the finale, the conclusion finale is like one of the strongest points of this game.
And what was it? The main character from that scenario even looks like the Final Fantasy 1 warrior. If you just look at the way he looks like in the trailer, they didn't show him. But they won't tell you what his scenario is, and I'll say, please look forward to it.
The first thing I thought when I saw it on the stream, well, as soon as they showed Alive with the red A, I knew it was like, I
remember like a few years ago or a year and a half ago, there were trademarks made for Live Alive in like every region. And trademarks are always like, sometimes, companies just do trademarks just to hold on to the name, not necessarily plan to do anything with them or what have you. But there was like a bunch of trademarks made in like every region relatively close to each other. And it's like, is something going to happen? And then they held like an event. It was weird. It was like the 20-something anniversary, but it wasn't a nice even number. And then they didn't nothing came of it. That always felt weird to me that they did all these trademarks and then they did this event and nothing came of it. So that's the first thing I thought, like, oh, maybe this was their plan at the time and they just had to wait a little bit longer to actually re-release it. So that's what I thought.
My question is, was this in development before Octopath or was it after Octopath?
Definitely after.
Well, it would have to be after.
I think all of this stuff has to be a reaction to Octopath's success, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's like, oh, they see Octopath sold, so let's just greenlight this project. Because I can't imagine Square greenlighting these projects these days. It's just like they're really.
I think they see clamor for the HD 2D art style, and they're going on it, I guess. So.
I mean, and all credit where credit is due. Like Square's been doing a really damn good job of bringing forward their back catalog. Especially the last 2 years, it's been insane.
Well, it's been hit and miss, right? Because we're still hot off of Kingdom Hearts.
Okay, guys. While you guys have been talking, I've been digging through some of our previous podcasts. Our podcast episode 174 in October of 2020 is when we had discussed the non-news from the Live Alive 26th anniversary stream. Remember that? So that would have been a year and a half ago. October of pandemic year 1 is we had the anniversary stream and nothing came of it. And that's the last time we talked about
the trademarks were made before then. So I have to imagine that's probably roughly when they decided, let's do this, or shortly after they greenlit it, and it was in development at the time. But yeah, it was weird that they held that 26th anniversary event before they were ready to announce this.
It's just how Square operates, though, right?
Yeah,
nothing's going on with Lagoon, for instance, but that still had weird tie-ins in mobile games and stuff. Which means then you have to keep the trademark up and the copyright stuff up to protect the stuff that's appearing in the mobile game and all that sort of stuff.
Xenogears had a birthday yesterday or today, right? And they brought back the Xenogears. Yeah. They brought back the Xenogears collab in Brave Exvius. So it's I'm actually going to doubt there's a Xenogears remaster in the works, because I think there's just a lot of weird logistics with Takahashi, but they're keeping the brand alive in the ways they can.
Chrono Cross is going to define a lot, I think. If that goes on and sells really well and does really well, I think Square will suddenly be looking at the rest of that PS1 catalogue and going, okay, what can we do? If Chrono Cross
spoilers for the rest of this podcast.
We have not introduced the Chrono Cross news, but we'll get to that.
I'll get to that.
Yeah. But I think that's what it's going to depend on, basically.
So, two things. One, damn, I fucking wish we got that board game for the collector's edition for Live Alive. That looks really fucking cool. Two, I don't know when you saw this, Alex. I don't know if it was before the Nintendo Direct or not for the Live Alive HD2D remake thing, but I just kind of want to know what was going through your mind when you saw that for the first time.
I knew nothing about this because I don't know. It probably because it was published by Nintendo. If I'm honest, if I'm entirely honest, sometimes sometimes I get a bit of a. So I knew about Chrono Cross. Had known for quite some time. And
everyone and their mom knew about Chrono Cross. It was an open secret.
Yeah, but I'd known quite a bit before that, and there were some Nintendo things. I'll be honest, I knew about Xenoblade 3, and I know stuff about it that isn't announced yet. But this, I had no clue about, and it was such a pleasant, wonderful surprise. And I was just hyped because my first thought was just, it's difficult to describe. It was just shock. I was just like, what? Because it's not a game I expected. And then I was also really pleased. And I'm not knocking Square when I say this, but I was really pleased to see that it's being published by Nintendo, because I think Nintendo has a knack for these games. I don't think Octopath would have been anywhere near as successful if it had been released in the West by Square, if I'm being honest.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
I think they've got a knack to promote these games, and also it lends the games, people pay more attention to Nintendo published games in a way. So so I was just super, super pleased. And yeah, I'm looking forward to all of it, basically, including the remastered soundtrack. And I said, second thought that went through my head was, and I even tweeted this at the time, I think this has increased the chances of Chrono Trigger HD 2D massively.
Okay, so I went back and looked at what Alex said in the chat when Live Alive was getting announced. His words were, quote, "Yo, what the fuck? I'm fucking melting."
There you go.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah.
There's another thing I want to ask. If there was all that NVIDIA leaks with all the PS1 era kind of remaster that was listed there, I mean, were they just going off hey, we're just going to name all these games at random, or do they actually... There was
So
something
here's my understanding about that NVIDIA leak. Basically, publishers are obviously working on games and trying to figure out if they're going to be GeForce Now games or whatever. And so that list was created by people at publishers. Now, the question is how that publisher operates. So some publishers, they don't have much, they don't really care what's being added to this database, and people are just adding random stuff or putting in code names or whatever. And other companies have quite genuine lists. So what was in that list for Square Enix? It was Chrono Cross Remaster, which has now been announced. The PC version of Final Fantasy VII Remake, which has now been released. A Final Fantasy IX Remake, which we still know nothing about. A Final Fantasy Tactics Remaster, still a no-go. Kingdom Hearts 4, still a no-go. New strategy game, which we can now safely guess is a Triangle, I guess.
Well, that
We knew
that
about
list
Triangle
came out
before
after
that.
Triangle was announced, but it might be the PC version of Triangle that's just not.
It might be the
named.
PC version
right.
of Triangle. It also might be Front Mission.
Yeah, it could be Front Mission.
Sure.
Front Mission is weird
Tactics-
because it's like not published by Square, but it's weird.
It had Tactics Ogre Remaster, which we know nothing about. A 25th anniversary Tomb Raider game, which seems like a shoe-in. I'd be amazed if that doesn't happen. And then this is the one that I think is interesting. They had Unannounced Card Game 2, which is now clearly
cards.
that second voice of cards.
Oh man,
Clearly.
Oh, card
that
name.
is funny.
So, and you do get things like Square Enix announced those Final Fantasy Tactics action figures, having not made any action figures for FFT for like 10, 15 years. I don't think that's a coincidence. I do believe that Final Fantasy Tactics Remaster is real. In fact, I believe that everything on this list is a real
I have
project.
a friend.
Have they
I have
all
a friend
Yeah, I'm
who
a
is
believer
kind of
direct.
cataloging this NVIDIA leak, even like the smaller stuff that no one cares about, and a lot of it is coming true. Like random, like I remember, I have no idea what it's called, but there was like some fireman game, like literally like a firefighting game that was on the list, and it came out on Steam, like announced.
I forgot the
sometime
name of
after.
that game, but I do remember a cool looking firefighting in the
Yeah,
game.
there's a lot on that list that's coming
The
true,
thing is,
and so maybe not
stuff
100%
gets
true,
cancelled.
maybe some of it, but
stuff
right.
gets cancelled as
It's-
well. So it's like Half-Life 2 Remastered was on the list. With Valve works. Who knows? Valve is a company that got so far down the road with Half-Life 3 and then just decided to throw it all in the trash. So, yeah, but like even you look at Sony, right, and like God of War was on the list, and then it was almost immediately announced for PC. So then you can look at that list and go, oh, well, Demon's Souls, Forbidden West, Ratchet and Clank, Returnal, Uncharted, Legacy of Thieves are probably all coming to PC. Was Legacy of Thieves announced for PC?
What is?
Like
I think it was. I think the Uncharted.
So there you go. That's two of them, right? And then you look at Take-Two's list of like Bioshock, a new Bioshock, a ray tracing remaster of Bioshock, and XCOM 3, and it's like they're all like obvious shoe-ins, really. Like Firaxis is going to make Midnight Suns, Civ 7, and XCOM 3.
I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the GeForce Now leak is probably the most comprehensive, like, big leak the industry has had in like years.
Other than that Capcom leak, and again, when you look at it, the Capcom games in the GeForce Now leak, Dragon's Dogma 2, Monster Hunter 6, which will be World 2, Resi 4 remake, and Street Fighter 6 are all things that leaked in the Capcom database breach.
Yeah, the NVIDIA leak is bigger in a sense because it obviously spans multiple publishers. So,
yeah, and yeah, I absolutely, and there were other things in there that are relevant to us. Like there was a Titan Quest 2,
Shin Megami Tensei 5,
SMT5 was in there, yeah, for PC.
Oh yeah,
which,
we
no
had a feature on that. Right? Yeah.
And obviously Judgment for PC, which is suggestive. This is what I mean about games can be added to this list. I have to imagine there was probably a bit of preliminary work done on Judgment on PC, and then they realised this copyright situation and realised they can't do it.
Johnny's like, "What you say? What you say?"
Yeah,
So I do
we
believe.
have,
So I
just so you know,
basically,
Alex,
I
we
do
have
believe that.
discussed that on this podcast about the talent agency behind Kimura's likeness.
Yeah. So, but I do believe that, and it's sort of like, okay, Kingdom Hearts 4 is on this list. What I'll say about that is the next Kingdom Hearts game going to be Kingdom Hearts 4? Who knows?
Who knows?
But, however, why do you
It's an
think the
event.
Switch version of Kingdom Hearts is this ass cloud version? And the answer is simple. The people at the top level of Kingdom Hearts are probably like being in control too much to farm that out to an external company. But they're also way too busy on the next Kingdom Hearts to stop and retool
Make a port.
the previous games for Switch. So it makes sense to me that would be quite far in production. Also, I think they've got a pipeline now. KH3 took way too long, especially because of the distractions with Versus and all the rest. So if I was Square and if I was Disney, I'd be saying, right, now can you make another one in 2.5 years, please? Or 3 years, please?
Yeah,
As
and
opposed to
there is a
taking
Kingdom Hearts 20th anniversary event. It seems like it's more of a fan event, but you never know. They might tease something, whether it's Kingdom Hearts 4 or something else. But that's
Or a new mobile
Can't wait for some like little innocuous thing at that event. Like, you have to pay attention to it because it's now canon or something.
But, you know...
Well, if you think about it, something to consider is that we have had yearly Kingdom Hearts releases since Kingdom Hearts 3, because we had Kingdom Hearts 3, then the DLC, then Melody of Memory. So maybe they're trying to make it a yearly thing where there's something.
Yeah, but I think they're getting better as well. Like, I think we'll see...
Kingdom Hearts 3.8 next chapter prologue.
I think we'll see. You know, FF7 Remake Part 2 at some point this year. I don't think they can go through this year without showing it because of it being FF7's 25th. And then obviously, I think it will probably come out next year. I don't think that we're going to be waiting. Like, when people are like, we're going to be waiting 5, 6, 7 years for Part 2. I'm just like, no, I don't think so. Like, they've got a combat system. They're working in Unreal, which is easily scalable, and you can get, and obviously external developers and stuff are very, very, very familiar and comfortable in it. So at that point, you can probably churn up those FF7 remake games one every 2 or 3 years. And that's what I expect them to do. Obviously, the pandemic slowed things down a bit. I wouldn't even be surprised if maybe that was originally, you know, in the original plan, if maybe that was set for this year, because obviously the 25th anniversary, but obviously then COVID and stuff and all the release schedules have shifted back 6-12 months, it feels like.
Well, it feels like, based on how many release dates we have started to put into place after like this Nintendo Direct, and even just like in the last couple of weeks, like 2021 seems like the sacrifice year in terms of, like, yes, we got a lot of great games, but it seems like 2022 is when people are finally getting their feet back under them. They've either learned how to like manage their new working environment with working from home or remote work, or just rescheduling what they're working with. And it seems like this is the year that we're going to kind of rebound. It's certainly what it feels like, especially looking at basically from the start of February onwards. And like we've got now the Live Alive in July. We've got we'll talk about this more, but Xenoblade in September, and everything else that Square hasn't yet unveiled beyond Stranger Paradise.
We got a shed load of Nintendo stuff, right? But then we've also got obviously Forspoken's got a date, but we hope and assume that FF16 is this year. Square releases a lot of games in a year, so I imagine there's probably some games that aren't on Switch, some smaller games that will pop up throughout the year.
I mean, well, Square already has like a shit ton of games coming out this year. Just next month, they're releasing 4 fucking games.
And this is, we're going completely on a tangent here. I apologize. I'm like derailing the whole podcast, but like the company that makes me really curious is Capcom. Because Capcom doesn't have a big game this year.
They've got Sunbreak, which
that's an expansion, though. That's an expansion. This is exactly what I mean. But like, if you think about it, Capcom has had at least one usually 2 big games a year. So it's like 2021 they had Rise and Resi Village, and then on the smaller side they also had Stories too. 2020 they had Resi 3.
You know,
2019
we already
they
know
had
know their big game this year. The big game is that Resident Evil multiplayer thing.
2019 they had DMC5 and Resi 2 like releasing within like 4 weeks of each other. 2018 they had Monster World. Did they have anything else?
World on itself is like gigantic.
Yeah, anything beyond World that sold ended up selling 20 million or whatever.
But 2017 they had Resi 7 and
Infinite.
Gen Ultimate and Infinite, which is probably best not spoke about. 2016 they had Dead Rising 4 and Street Fighter 5. Yeah, so it's like unless we'll see. Obviously, originally Pragmata was going to be this year, but that's now 2023. But it feels too early for Resident Evil 4.
I think we could
feels
see
too early for
the
Resident
next.
Evil 9.
I think we could see the next Ace Attorney maybe.
Yeah, but that's small potatoes. I'm talking
Yeah.
about a Street Fighter, Resident Evil, and Monster Hunter. Like a big AAA game. I hope to see the next Ace Attorney. That would be I have to assume the next Ace Attorney is, they just remaster 4, 5, and 6, right? And then they do a new one.
Obviously, time for a new Power Stone and Darkstalkers. Then,
well, we're just sort of in a holding pattern. I guess this is the thing. This is the question. Is like the answer to that question is how ready is Street Fighter 6?
I remember they said they shared after the latest stream when they were talking about like Luke, like they hope to share something about it this year, but I don't think it's gonna be ready.
That game has been in production for a long time, but the thing I will say, my understanding is that it got quite significantly rebooted at one point. Basically, after Arnold left, after he was out, they really rethought that game. But I'm really excited. But yeah, it's interesting that Capcom doesn't have much. If it's just going to be Sunbreak, is an interesting situation for them to be in. Not that it's going to hurt them; they've got the money. It's been a long time since Capcom hasn't had one.
Yeah, just their own precedent that they've set for themselves.
But then again, like I say, they're gearing up to announce Dragon's Dogma 2, right? Which is going to be Game of the Generation, so it's all fine.
That's true.
Yeah, like even if this is a slower year for them, it seems pretty clear that 2023 is going to be massive, especially if like Resident Evil 4 remake happens.
If that year is Resi 4 remake, Street Fighter 6, and Dragon's Dogma 2, which it easily could be, although I have to imagine Dragon's Dogma is going to take longer. World 2 probably makes more sense, yeah, than Dragon's Dogma, because obviously. When was DMC5? 2 years ago, so that means Dragon's Dogma's been in.
Oh no,
3 years ago.
DMC5 was 2019.
Yeah, but if they started right after DMC5, 3 years isn't that long for a new big RPG sort of Elder Scrollsy.
Yeah, I mean, but it was like early 2019. It was like March, so I could see 2023 being for Dragon's Dogma 2. Like that would be like. If it was a holiday title, that would be like 4.5 years.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, I think it's going to be a good year, and I think we're seeing the release schedule pad out, and I think it's definitely a good year for RPGs. I will let you talk about
Enix,
it. I will go
Nintendo.
in a minute and let you talk about the direct, but I was slightly disappointed.
You hear that, guys? Xenoblade is the dregs.
I was slightly disappointed that the Fire Emblem is a Warriors game. In the summer, I had my hopes up for a proper Fire Emblem in the summer.
We haven't discussed this yet properly, but after seeing like Hyrule Warriors 2 on Switch, I'm just like,
terrible.
I don't know.
Terrible.
I don't know if I want to even.
Chow will be waiting forever.
I am just so frustrated that like all the Mosu Warrior games like that are like exclusive to Switch. Like even the Token Ranbu Warriors to an extent, it's still exclusive to Switch in the West because while it has technically a PC release, that's siphoned off the DMM Games client in Japan and whatnot. So it's just I don't like prospect of just like a Warriors Musu game being on the Switch because of fucking Hyrule
What's
Warriors,
interesting is Fire Emblem
Fire
Warriors
Emblemers.
1 and Hyrule Warriors 1 didn't run that poorly, but Age of Calamity is in my opinion, a piss take.
It's terrible.
It's just like it's too far. It's
I will
significant.
say-
like,
I'm used to them running at 60 FPS, and this coming from like someone who played Dynasty Warriors 3 on the PS2. So I'm not gonna say it was like perfect 60 FPS, but it ran at 60 FPS like when it mattered, and like both of those games just like that's too much to ask, apparently.
yeah.
Well, thanks for jumping on, Alex. We have a lot of the other games that you've kind of like introduced and teased that we're basically
Yeah,
padding out
sorry.
the year. No,
you've upended our schedule, our
No,
Well, like I
I'm
said,
not-
I will,
strategy here.
because we've got some big stuff that I'm gonna, over the coming weeks, I shall try to endeavour to be back to talk about games that are coming out that I will be playing. I'll leave the audience to guess what they will be. I think it's pretty obvious. But so I'll try and come back to discuss those with the other people that will be playing those games in the coming weeks.
No, it was this was kind of unplanned, but this like everything from Elden Ring through Live Alive through your experience with a weird hotel room staring act on whatever game you were playing there. We'll take guesses, and it was really good to have you on. So thanks.
Cool. Right, I will see you guys in a bit.
All right, take care, dude.
Thanks for having me. See ya.
We'll be here.
All
We
right.
kind of already talked about the Nintendo Direct in vague terms.
Well, actually, that'll kind of help because we can kind of just maybe hit the surface of the waves of these, and then maybe go into more detail as we like start approaching as these games release. And I don't know. We'll have to figure out exactly
already
this.
2.5 hours in.
No, all right. So we'll have to curate this a bit. But obviously, the big two pieces of news, these are probably like the highlights from our site for the Nintendo Direct. These are the ones that we can't really skip or cut out. And that is obviously the Chrono Cross Remaster and Xenoblade 3. And both of these were not really out of the blue. These are sort of things people could guess. So let's just start with Chrono Cross. So obviously, part of the NVIDIA leak, people have been speculating this for a while. It had the another Eden crossover stuff that Josh has talked about previously. It exists. It's real. It is Chrono Cross, the Radical Dreamers Edition, which is releasing as a remaster on April 7th for Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, PC, and PlayStation 4, and for $19.99. So as like at a remaster friendly price. So I guess I'll just start out with the obvious necessary question: who here has played Chrono Cross?
Me.
I haven't.
I think it's me, Chow, and Josh.
Who here wants to play the remaster? I'll say me.
I do.
Yeah, I'll play it. I'll give it another go. I like the game. Like it has really great music, and like I like the characters a lot. So it's kind of like the remaster isn't like the ideal way I'd want to see this game again, but it's okay, I guess.
Yeah, I've heard people say that it's one of those Square like PlayStation 1 RPGs where you could tell that it was released kind of
like you just see this compared to like what they did with Live Alive. It's like, all right, cool. I'm not saying this should get an HD 2D remake because it'd be unreasonable on the way this game was developed with like the pre-rendered 3D backgrounds, but like you just see stuff like there's already examples out there of existing AI upscales of Chrono Cross that are like look much better. It's like
so
it's frustrating.
So this is the detail, the skinny on Chrono Cross, the Radical Dreamers Edition, is that it does include a few like quality of life abilities, such as the no encounters mode. It has obviously like the visual remaster flair, such as a new background filter, HD font, new character artwork, and specifically, and this is a key point, is that you can have the new look or the original look as a toggle. The only potential shortcoming is that you have to toggle all of the remaster effects on or off. You can't say like I want the new font with the old artwork. It's all or nothing. And then specifically, it also introduces or it re-includes Radical Dreamers, as you might have best guessed based on the name, which was the text-based adventure that originally released for the Satellaview as kind of like a side story. And I don't know all the details about the history of this, except that the West never got it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
It's not really a side story. It's more like
it was kind of it's
different
more like
telling
a
of-
prototype of Chrono Cross. It has Kid and Surge. I don't know if Surge is the same name, but it was kind of what became Chrono Cross in a way.
All right, so
like
that's bundled in with
narratively.
this. And it is obviously not too far away. I already said that's releasing on April 7th, so in less than 2 months. So last year,
it'll be an interesting game to cover because Chrono Cross has a little bit of like a mixed reception. It's a sequel to Chrono Trigger, but not in what we typically think of as sequels. Like it follows different characters. The Chrono Trigger characters they are like present in a way in the game, but in a very kind of loose sort of way. It's very unique in the way it handles itself as a sequel. So it's one of those things that like going into this remaster, it's going to be interesting to like kind of go in with that sort of mindset. Maybe knowing it's an interesting take on.
It'll be interesting to see like
some people might even argue if it is a bad sequel or not.
Well, it'd be interesting to see like when people review this game, have impressions on this game, make videos of this. If now that we've had distance from its original release, it will be a little bit less how good of a sequel is this game and more just what does this game offer. So
it is a top-rated game in Metacritic for the longest time. You know that, right?
What?
It was a top-rated game in Metacritic for a while.
Actually,
like user score or what?
No, that's from like their gamer. That's from the journalist review score from big publishers. It's basically in the top 90s or whatever for the longest time, but user score is really mixed bag.
Yeah, so Chrono Cross, if you're not familiar, you basically play as Surge. I assume that's how you pronounce his name, and then you recruit lots of different characters to your team. Kid is like a main character, of course, but the game has more than it's like 40, I think. So a lot of these characters, they get a little bit of a personality and like a tiny backstory, but they're not really like a fleshed out cast or whatnot. They're more just kind of like quirky units that you can use, and they got their weird abilities and whatnot. And then like the story itself is, it's kind of a really heartfelt story. It gets kind of into the weeds with like some of the time travel-y chrono stuff that comes into play there. But the game, it's undoubted its strength is that its music is fantastic, done by Mitsuda. It's got a really nice art style for the PlayStation 1 era. Great color palette. I actually don't quite remember the battle system quite so much. I remember it's turn-based, but there's like this sort of elemental tug-of-war thing going on with like which elements are present on the field and which ones you're using to kind of like tweak it. I don't remember the specifics. It's been too long. But it's interesting that this remaster is $20 considering like Saga Frontier Remaster, which came out, a year prior, is $25. The Legend of Mana Remaster was $30. This one seems like it may be a little bit of a lighter of a remaster, like not so many upgrades. Unlike Legend of Mana, they didn't have to like recreate the backgrounds or whatnot. And unlike Saga Frontier, they're not adding, a bunch of content to it. So maybe that's why. But, I think someone mentioned on this cast earlier, it's nice that Square Enix is just taking this, their catalog and making it available to,
everything
some mixed results maybe in terms of how well.
There's value in that too, just like simply putting up because like for better or worse, at least with the PC version, the community will quote unquote fix it if like
there's going to be mods for every single thing you could possibly want tweaked. So
I don't know, $20.
I'm definitely curious. Sorry.
I said $20 seems like a steal to me. I mean, do you know how much those cartridge for Radical Dreamer goes for?
Yeah, it's insane. So this is definitely.
I wonder if those will start depreciating a bit. I wonder.
Probably. I have to imagine.
I think like sometimes these digital releases don't seem to have that much effect on like collector prices for things.
I can see that,
because people, if they really want the physical, like real deal, if you will. Like I don't think like Suikoden 2, that's been a while. Like I don't think those prices for those CDs came down much when it was released on the PS3, PSN. But anyways, I'm interested to try this, to experience this remaster and kind of go into it kind of with fresh mind, fresh eyes, kind of knowing what I do now about it. So
and in the interest of time, we'll kind of have to leave it at that. But yeah, Radical Dreamers edition for Chrono Cross, April 7th for Switch, PS4, Xbox, and PC. And then the other game that I introduced that was probably the big highlight for our coverage is Xenoblade 3. Obviously had a big new story trailer for it. It was, people were expecting that we might see this. And depending on how big of a Xenoblade Xeno Takahashi nut you are. There's a lot you can like derive from the trailer. There's some things that are very obvious, like the fact that we see High Entia or a High Entia character. We also did get a kind of a letter from Takahashi about the game, about the reveal, and basically in no few, they're not being coy about it. In fact, in the official synopsis, they're saying that this is a game that will connect the futures of both Xenoblade Chronicles and Chronicles 2.
Connect the futures.
Yeah,
like
whatever that means.
I know for a while that people were like kind of assuming that looking at the ends of Xenoblade 1 and 2 that the worlds had been reconnected, but there was like no confirmation. Well, obviously now there's confirmation.
Well, at the very end of Xenoblade 2, it's like, is this just kind of like a for fans little cameo, kind of like a little bit of fan service, or is this really gonna like tie together in a certain way? And then with the Xenoblade Chronicles 1 Future Connected, it seemed, and I know Adam actually kind of praised this, mostly standalone. I think we were like, thank God we didn't do Future Connected and see Rex or Pyra or something. So it'll be interesting to see like to what extent this bridges 1 and 2, and based on the wording there, Future Connected, the little add-on to Xenoblade Chronicles 1 Definitive Edition, how much that'll play a role, and like the antagonists there seem to kind of come out of nowhere and return to nowhere. So
it's cool, like seeing like a brand new cast of characters. They all seem pretty cool and interesting in their designs. Like I really like the main character because he looks like a mixture between like
Flynn.
Flynn and then like Macross Frontiers Alto, So
I've seen a lot of like Flynn plus Tatsuya.
Yeah,
I've seen a lot of here's Cold Steel Reen wearing the character in the main two characters, both shown playing flutes, which seems to be a central like iconography of the game.
That's something cool. Like those flutes have a similar design to Zanza on them. That's cool.
Yeah. So you remember this, right? The premise, it seems like we have like two different kingdoms. And there's like three characters
Noah
from each.
And Mio are the two like seemingly main characters. So I want to get that out there.
Yeah, and they seem to be like at odds at first, but this trailer shows them like playing flutes together. So I'm sure that doesn't last, that they're at odds with each other. But this trailer also seems to shows two different masked characters that I'm pretty much everyone has guessed who they are. There's a masked High Entia with small wings. Like who
else?
Who matches that description?
There's
also a person who seems to have like a cat-like figure and a cat mask. And it's like, who could that be? Based on what we know,
core crystal location as well.
I didn't even notice the core crystal stuff, but I'm just going to say it. People are assuming that's Melia and Nia.
People have been making jokes about how the two female MCs from 1 and 2,
the ones that didn't get the guy,
the L's.
But yeah, and if this takes, I think they even said this takes place hundreds of years after. I think that's official. Did they say that, or was that a rumor?
Remember,
I want to say there was actually something specific that said hundreds of years.
We had to like grab like what's the official synopsis? What was in Takahashi's letter? What did we glean from the trailer? And then,
but it would make sense if Melia and Nia are still around, because Melia is a High Entia and Nia is I forget like what the term of it. She's some sort of blade thing. I forget what the specific term was.
Was she a flesh eater or?
There's flesh eater and another type of eater, and I remember there's a very slight difference, but they both have long lifespans, so they're around. It would make sense.
Flesh eater,
the trailer itself, it shows a lot of the trailer did not show much combat. And
all mostly
combat systems, and the combat systems in these games get a little bit overwrought and full of UI. But it shows it showed a lot of the environments in the usual Xenoblade style, where you have a character running across a vista with either like a giant like landscape in the background, or a mech, or a building, and it all looks really cool in the very usual Xenoblade style. So
yeah, this looks, obviously one we're definitely going to keep an eye on, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be playing it, and September of this year, right?
Yeah, we don't have a date, but just September 2022 this year.
Can't wait to spend another like several hundred hours in a Xenoblade.
I'm very interested to see what the battle system shapes up in this game.
Yeah, I'm interested in like the battle mechanics. If there's going to be a blade mechanic, are they going to bring that back?
Yep.
What about the field actions?
So
ahead,
here's an
James.
interesting thing people notice from the footage. There's 4 party members, like Xenoblade Cross.
So,
So Xenoblade Cross still not on Switch.
This will connect. The Xenoblade 3 will connect X to the rest of the Xenoblade.
They're gonna like realize they're on what's the Xenoblade Cross planet? Like Mira is
Mira,
just like right
yeah.
next door or something.
Yeah, no. Look, we just gotta accept eventually that because Xenoblade Cross had the misfortune of being on the Wii U and therefore not doing well, it's just dead.
We'll never get a conclusion to that cliffhanger.
But obviously, since the cat girl is now the main girl, there's no point. There's no way she's gonna lose now, right?
Depends who the voice actress is.
We know the Japanese voice actors, like they're listed. I don't know. I'm not as familiar with those, but
I guess
they've
that's
been
another
revealed.
footnote that I feel like we should bring up. Like there was that rumor about like Jenna Coleman having voiced additional lines for a new game. It's like, oh, based on this trailer,
Well,
we're
that
like,
makes sense.
I wonder why that happened. So
There's this Reddit joke I found that if your main heroine's voiced by Nao Toyama, she's gonna lose 90% of the time.
Does she voice Mio in this game?
Nah, I don't think so.
do we
I
get
don't
voice
know.
actors for either language? I don't think we did.
We got the Japanese ones. Let me pull.
I didn't realize that we did.
I think it's just from the website. It feels like this is pretty common where Japanese voice actors are revealed right away, like as soon as it's announced. But then English usually comes later.
She is voiced by Minami Suda.
Oh, okay.
So your odds are pretty okay.
Yeah, they're pretty okay then.
She always gets the guy.
Let's see the other things to note. Character designer from 2 is coming back for this. Matsuku Saito. He's going to be returning for the character design, and then
The character designs in general, I think, are really good.
I don't watch that much anime in Japanese, but the one voice actor I actually recognize is Megumi Han.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, I know Megumi Han as the voice of Gon from Hunter x Hunter. That's what I know her from.
I don't watch Hunter x Hunter. I just know her.
I know she's done a lot of other stuff.
I just know her as the replacement voice of Sailor Mass in the new Gundam Origin kind of story. And I found she did a fantastic job because the old VA was gone a long time ago. So
yeah. And then they also in the director's letter also showed off Matsuda is going to be returning along with Manami Kyoda, Ace, Kenji Hiramatsu, and Miriam. I don't know how to pronounce their last name. Abu Nasser. Yeah,
don't know. Yeah, but this is sort of something that we're expecting. I think we're kind of getting it. I would have guessed that this would have been a holiday season game, like November, but no, September, so pretty early. Always seems like a kind of a good spot for big RPGs is in that like September, early October timeframe. So I think this will fit really well, especially compared to Xenoblade 2, which didn't that end up releasing like halfway through December or early December? I don't remember, but it was way later in the year.
One thing I do hope is that Xenoblade Chronicles 2, when it first released, it was, I don't know if people remember, but it was kind of rough in terms of performance and like some UI and quality of life stuff that those things got like added kind of almost like hotfixes for the first 2 months. So I'm kind of hoping that Persona Xenoblade 3 kind of comes in a little bit steadier state.
I agree with you.
So there's a few other things, like those are the big 3 hitters of the Nintendo Direct: the Live Alive, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and Chrono Cross: The Radical Dreamers. Jess, was there any other specific part of the Nintendo Direct that you thought was really interesting that we should go to next?
I mean, not in particular that stood out to me. I mean, yeah, Xenoblade seems like it was the big one. There was the Fire Emblem Warriors one, but then that is a spin-off, so... Well, Kirby was pretty interesting, but I'm not sure if that really qualifies as an RPG.
It does.
Kirby one is
I've enjoyed all like the Kirby car, Kirby whatever memes. Those are a bit fun.
They already have an official pin for it.
I'm not surprised, but we can go into Fire Emblems. So did you? I assume then you played Three Houses.
Oh yeah, I did. That one's it was the first. They started off with it. It's just like I wrote the news bit on it for the website I was working for at the time. So I was like, okay, well. I think the interesting thing about it is that, it is a spin-off, but the thing about Warrior spin-offs is that it's kind of like an alternate universe where like for example, people who are dead could be like together with other characters, or like interactions that wouldn't be able to happen in
Yeah,
the
and we
other
saw that with
game.
Hyrule Warriors: Age of Calamity. So I do need to give the lead here, and that's basically the announcement that Jess was talking about, that Alex also kind of preempted, is that Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes is basically another entry in the Nintendo themed Warriors games. It is releasing on Switch on June 24th. And I don't know if this is official or just gleaned from the trailer, because it seems pretty obvious. It seems like it takes place during the time skip in Fire Emblem Three Houses, which then leads to like what Jess is introducing, where it's like, wait, why is Byleth there? Because shouldn't she or he be in like a river or something like that? So that seems to be the kind of like the premise setting of this game, is kind of a non-canon what if, it's kind of weird because it's like bridging the gap with story content that was obviously skipped over during time skip, but also in a way where it can't be too significant because it ends up being seemingly non-canon.
It
well,
might end up just being like a totally different outcome of the
Right.
war
Yeah,
at this point.
I don't necessarily think it could be an alternate canon, because one thing to
Mhm.
consider is that Three Houses was Koei Tecmo, so I mean,
Mm-hmm.
That's a
it's
good
the
point,
same-
actually.
yeah, yeah.
I have seen some memes about like the three Lord characters, how their design looks like a halfway step between their like student and time skip designs, where like people made memes that they look like their Pokemon like chart like starter mid level, and their time skip
They're
design
the
being like
unwanted middle
their
evolution.
yeah. So they're in their middle evolutions right now, or in this Warriors game. People just. I don't know if there's any confirmation on that, but just sort of how they look, like their hairstyle and their armor and their weapon.
Jess,
So-
did you play Hyrule Warriors, either one?
I did not actually. I just
Oh.
kind of know tangentially from like watching gameplay and things like that.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, where I've watched a little bit of the original Fire Emblem Warriors. I watched my brother play Hyrule Warriors: Age of Calamity a little bit. So Fire Emblem Warriors, I'm only really interested in seeing like what other people's takes are, like people who really like Warrior games, or really like specifically the Nintendo like recent partnerships with Koei Tecmo. But like other than that, I'm not interested in playing this just really at all. And I'm kind of with Alex, where it was just like, I was hoping for another Fire Emblem game. I was hoping for the Genealogy of the Holy War remake, or even like just a straight up sequel. But this is, I guess, if those, if this is something that kind of fills the gap, kind of like how Age of Calamity is bridging between, or at least bridging the time between Breath of the Wild 1 and whatever its sequel ends up being. But I'm interested to see what people's takes are on this, or whether it'll be kind of maligned like Age of Calamity sort of was. Is there really anything else to dive into here on this?
Not really. I mean, it's
Right.
just it's a new Fire Emblem Warriors the Three Houses cast. That's kind of the long and short of
For
it.
people who care about this sort of stuff, it seems to have female Byleth and not male Byleth, which I don't know if that's like the first confirmation of which one is quote canon. Like she's the one on the cover art,
Rip male Byleth.
Well, it's because everyone played female Byleth, so I mean,
Not me.
Did I? I don't even remember. I don't think so.
I did both.
I think it. Yeah, I think male. I did male.
I played through the game 4 times, so I switched it up because I'm a loser. The original game. And I don't like the name Three Hopes. It's just too close to like, what other word can we substitute in to like to make this very
I wonder
clear that
is
it's
it
a
called Three
cycle?
Hopes in Japan as well?
That's a good question.
I remember
hold on.
the original game in Japanese, Three Houses, like its Japanese title is like
Totally different. It's like a poetry verse.
it's like
it was something
it's
about
basically
like
like
the
four
season,
seasonal, like
yeah, because there was
Yeah.
like 4 routes and whatnot. So.
and it was like done with like 4 different kanji in like a more like a poetic way, I guess.
Yeah.
And so Three Houses was totally just like a localization thing. Like we can't do this, and we can't do this poetry kanji thing in English. So let's do Three Houses, and now we go Three Hopes.
Called in Japan is literally Fire Emblem Muso, and then the Japanese title for Three Houses.
All right, so there were obviously several other games at the Nintendo Direct that maybe we can kind of just like rapid fire through in the interest of time, since we kind of got upended by our surprise cameo from Alex, which I was totally happy to do. But like I kind of preempted at the very start of this podcast 2.5 hours ago, these things end up being kind of jam-packed for our site's coverage. So also thank you to Adam and everyone else who was there, like Andrea as well, and other people who helped gather like the screenshots and the artwork during the Nintendo Direct to get it all up on the site. We got a release date for Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp. It is coming out on April 8th. That was obviously delayed from its original date. It was originally supposed to come out last year, right? But then got delayed into this year nebulously.
Yeah, it was supposed to be like holiday, I think.
Yeah, December 3rd, and then it got delayed to just like a nebulous early 2022, April 8th. We got a new trailer for it. It's mostly the news here is the release date. People are still going to be kind of contentious on the art style of it. It has kind of like the new Super Mario Bros. Take on art, where it's like, I bring back the sprites. I don't know, but as a fan of intelligent systems, and even though this is WayForward's take on it, I am interested in this game because I only ever played the original Advance Wars, and it was like forever ago, like 20 years ago. So
Yeah,
another one that we're
looks
filling
pretty
in on the
solid.
calendar. And this was also kind of brought up by Alex a little bit earlier. We got the announcement of the remake of Front Mission 1. Now, I don't know much about Front Mission, so this is called Front Mission First Remake. Who has played the original game here? Anyone?
I have.
All right, so like I don't know much about this series other than that it features
Amano
mechs.
does the artwork for this series.
What is it? Has anyone played Ark the Lad?
Yeah, dude, Ark the Lad 2 is so sick. Hell yeah.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite games of all time. But it's made by the same developer, and it was published by Square. So it's like it's a grid tile strategy game, and you get to customize your mech, and it's a little different because in most tactics games made in those era, your progression's always you get stronger. But here there's like, because you use a Panzer, which is the mechs in this game,
Wanderer.
German pronunciation. Yeah, when you use them, it's there's always some kind of balance. It's like, oh, this thing is a little stronger, but you'll lose a lot of speed equipping this thing. So there's a lot of balance and twinkering that you need to get used to, right?
Okay, think about like the part how parts affect armored core mechs, and then that's kind of how it's translated to the strategy RPG, and then you have to think about taking off and disabling specific parts of a mech through strategy RPG combat, saying, okay, like this part on a mech is a threat, I need to get rid of it ASAP, essentially. And like prioritizing like what your objectives are in that mission, like what are the most threatening things in a certain mission, and making sure, okay, I need to like prioritize this part on an enemy mech first, while terrain affects things as well.
Yeah, it's a lot different than the norm for its time. There is a fan translation out for the Super Nintendo. It's a little kind of rough. I think that's what people know it back for. But there is a fan translation if people want to go over it. Then if you're not interested in that, there is also a DS port that has a full English translation from Square.
Front Mission is fairly, it's like the way it progresses is fairly like standard, like on how like level based. But I remember Front Mission Second was a little bit more different and weird in the way it progressed, and they already have to confirm that they're also remaking Front Mission Second as well.
Yeah. So the full announcement here is that Front Mission First Remake will be available in the summer, undated, and then they're also working on Front Mission 2 Remake, also of course not dated.
Yeah, so about a year ago or so, we got like an announcement from Forever Entertainment that basically they would be remaking, I forget what wording they used, but they would basically be remaking some Square Enix games, and people were like, speculating what it could be, and of all sorts. But turns out those remakes that they were talking about a year ago were the Front Mission games, and we know they're doing the first two. The first one, does the first one have a date? Did we mention, or is it just summer?
Summer.
Okay, and then there's a second one coming later.
So it's not a pack. I almost thought like the trailer also advertised it as like a pack. I don't know.
It was weird that the trailer kind of announced both games, but they're separate things. And it's maybe worth mentioning that these games are Switch exclusive, but they're not published by Nintendo, and they're not published by Square Enix either. They're actually published by Forever Entertainment. So it's a little bit of an unusual situation where it seems like Forever Entertainment is like licensing the IP name from Square Enix, and it's still a Switch exclusive. So it's kind of
I imagine it'll be like Panzer Dragoon, where it's a timed exclusive on Switch and it'll come to other platforms later. So
It's not like Live Alive where it's actually published by Nintendo.
Yeah.
And that one might come to other platforms later, regardless. Like Octopath did.
So I mean,
or Bravely.
this is really exciting to see. I'm really looking forward to it. And Front Mission, hell of a series. Would love to see them do more, and hopefully this is successful.
Yeah. I think the most exciting part is we actually get to play the second game in English for the first time ever. Right?
Yeah. I only played that like the Japanese.
Yeah, people don't
Japanese.
really like the original 2 because it was really sluggish. It was really slow, and
Mhm.
maybe there's a lot of quality of life that will improve that.
Yeah, I
maybe.
wonder what they're gonna do too, because it's definitely not my favorite in the series, but the first one, a very solid game.
Even the third one. The third one's extremely long game.
Yeah.
Third
Front
one,
Mission 4 though, hell of a game.
and there's also 5.
5 is so good.
5 is known as the best one. And
5 is so good. Fuck. I hope we somehow get there. Oh my god.
it's like we need to get those PS2 HD remasters or something. Open the room for maybe the Xeno Saga remaster that we all hope for.
Okay. Shooting for the sky.
A couple other games that were announced on the direct that I guess this one is kind of in a similar vein because it also features mechs. We got the announcement of SD Gundam Battle Alliance, and even though this is announced at the Nintendo Direct, it was also revealed to be launching for PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, and PC. So kind of similar to Chrono Cross. I have to hand this over to I have to. I'm sorry, Josh. I have to hand this over to you. SD Gundam Battle Alliance. I don't know anything of this other than it lists 18 different Gundam series that are represented here, all in this chibi art style.
Yeah, I mean,
What I know is that SD stands for super deformed.
There you go.
That checks out.
The more you know. So yeah, I mean, this is
an action RPG.
Yes, this action RPG. You run with a party of 3. It's like a hack and slash. I don't know if it's as like a Dynasty Warriors, but it's certainly in that similar vein. And you're upgrading stats as you go along with them. We only got a very, very brief look, but it's definitely adapting, the storylines of quite a handful of Gundam series in it. So you're following the stories on that. And they already confirmed that there's going to be you can do multiplayer and online multiplayer in this. So it's just it looks to be a cute little fun time. Can't really say much more about it because it was only a very brief teaser trailer, but it's what you expect out of a Gundam action game. And hopefully it's very fun. They showed off the original Gundam. They showed off the Gundam Unicorn. They showed off the Freedom Gundam. Just what you would expect out of a Gundam game. I think the most exciting thing about it is I wonder what the roster looks like, because they have a lot of classic UC era, and then you also have some of the more outlandish Gundam series out there, like G Gundam. You have Gundam X, Turn A Gundam in there, and then you have your even G Recco and Iron Blooded Orphans. So it's cool.
I'm kind of surprised that there is no PC port or anything of the Gundam versus Gundam series from Namco. Or
I don't know. They're so weird about where Gundam is. I really hope this one is good though. I am very interested in learning more about it, and I want to get my hands on it. It looks like a fun time.
And it's sorry, can't speak. It's listed to come out this year, 2022, but no specific window or date.
What was that Gundam game that came out a few years ago that was PC exclusive in the West? Crossrays?
Yeah, G Generation.
Is there a reason why that would be PC exclusive in the West, but this one isn't? Is there some licensing thing?
I don't know exactly why they had.
I remember Crossrays came out on PlayStation 4 and Switch, but only in Japan and Asia. In the West, it was PC only, and I just assumed there's some licensing thing where if it's not on a store shelf, it's easier to sell or something. I don't know,
because there's one of those games that it got a console release, but only in Southeast Asia for a console.
Right, I just said that, but it's I was wondering why that would be restricted to PC in the West, where this one seems to be,
I mean, G Generation Crossrays also had a premium sound pack in the console releases. I don't know if that was offered here. I don't remember off the top of my head. If that premium sound pack was offered here in the West, and then it might have been some weird transition period where Bandai Namco was kind of testing the waters, because they finally they finally breached that door open with Super Robot Wars 30 by offering the sound pack in the West, but it was only for the PC release as well, because that only got a PC release in the West. While in Southeast Asia, that also got console releases. So
Yeah.
I don't
like
know.
obviously there's some legal thing, but what it is specifically, I don't know.
I have no idea what's the big distinguisher between those series and now here. Like maybe the SD Gundam license lets them like bypass that. I have no idea.
Now, whenever we're
before we
watching
go and continue
Nintendo,
on, before I continue on, I wanted just to mention that Jess had to head out.
all right, so the schedule
Jess.
for this podcast got a little bit upended, like I said, but we're fine with that. So Jess had to step out, but we will reconvene with her with a game that we're going to probably plan on talking about next week. And of course, as I have to say this, go ahead and give her Arceus review a read up on the site.
Yep.
And whenever we cover Nintendo Directs, one thing that one of our contributors, Kite Steinbuck, always makes sure to do is to keep a keen eye out on any differences between the English version of the Nintendo Direct and the Japanese version, because usually always there are one or two things that are independent to either one or the other. In this case, it turns out that the Advance Wars news was absent from the Japanese Nintendo Direct, and in exchange, they revealed an announcement of another new RPG. And this one is stylized as Loop 8. I don't know if it's pronounced like that or just Loop, but this is it seems like, based on the trailer, a turn-based JRPG that was announced for Japan only, for PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. I don't know much about this, but we also got like a list of the key staff members working on it. It's got composers from the Ace Attorney
It's Marvelous,
series.
right?
Yes, it is Marvelous.
Is it a Marvelous game? So like you'd be keeping an eye on like XE for localization at some point if it gets one.
Well,
I imagine it would.
If it gets one, the funniest way you can announce a localization for your JRPG without actually announcing it is saying it's getting an Xbox One port.
Oh, is it? What are the
platforms? That is true. Yeah, that is true.
It's releasing on Xbox One in Japan. So maybe,
give us a rundown of the staff. You were getting to that.
It's got Noriyuki Iwadare from Ace Attorney, game design from Yuri Shigemura. Oh, and Grandia. And then some concept art from Kitsunero. And so a lot of history here from like VTubers and Vocaloids. And I guess also the theme song singer, Naho Krisu. I don't know who this person is, but they performed at the Winter Olympics just this year. So I think that's pretty cool. And we got a Japanese trailer. It's about 2 minutes of footage, mostly just establishing the story, but it does actually show some gameplay. I don't speak the language, of course, so unfortunately I can't glean much more than just the visuals are showing. It takes place in a school setting. Kite actually used the word juvenile as a juvenile RPG just to kind of establish what the setting is. So kind of
that's pretty common that's what they call it in Japan.
Right. And so basically juvenile. It's just establishing that it has some sort of that like persona sort of vibe. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it has that sort of art style as well. But it did not show up in the English Direct. Even in Japan, it doesn't have a release date other than this year. But just keep an eye on it because that obviously, as we've kind of implied, we saw it here in the Japanese Direct first, but I wouldn't be surprised if within a few months, we kind of like with Monarch last year, we end up hearing about its localization efforts, just a little bit delayed. But again, the title is Loop 8.
Yeah, the most alluring thing about this RPG, like first impressions, like there's a time travel mechanic where players have to go back in time. It'll be able to alter the future somehow in this game, and I think it's an interesting high theory because they specifically mentioned it's at a Japanese rural town in August 1983, and like being able to like pinpoint a specific point in time for that is like really cool.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea of it being set in the 80s. I don't know, I just like that.
Me too.
Like, enough with this retro future, enough with this like future, near future time. Let's go back to the 80s.
Or even retro future. Just fuck it, 80s.
Yeah, just 80s. Do it.
That was it for the major RPG news from the Nintendo Direct. A few things that we'll just kind of rapid fire through here. We obviously knew about the release date and the release details of Triangle Strategy, which is coming out in early March. There's a new demo available, and similar to the demo for Octopath Traveler, if I remember correctly, the progress will transfer over to the full game. So the earlier demo, you played through, I believe, chapters 6 and 7. Now you can play through the first 3 chapters, and the progress can be transferred over. So that is available now.
feedback on that has been interesting from people who've gotten their hands on it.
Yeah, I really like the original demo. I hear basically my impression of the feedback of this demo is that God, there's a lot of dialogue and a lot of story, and it's maybe not great. Just the balance between story and gameplay seems to be kind of taking some people by surprise. At least that's my impression reading what people have been thinking. Haven't played it myself yet, though. We also got new additions to the Nintendo Switch Online library, namely Earthbound Beginnings and Earthbound, or Mother 1 and Mother 2 in Japan.
I remember when this was being shown, like in that moment, those like 10 seconds of like, are they going to say and Earthbound 3 or Earthbound 2 or Mother 3 or whatever? Like, were they going to like drop it there, some like shock surprise? But no, they didn't.
No,
just the first two.
They don't need to. They need to keep it as a meme, just like Duke Nukem Forever. Because once it's released, it's no longer special.
I don't know. Duke Nukem Forever is still kind of a meme, but oh yeah. So these are available on Switch Online as of the Nintendo Direct, and I'm kind of like, I want to play these, but I don't want to pay for Switch Online. But they're good. They're good titles.
Get them on Wii U.
Are they there? Oh, I guess
I think you can get them on Virtual Console.
I don't know why I asked that, because I don't have a Wii U. Like, oh wow, they're on Wii U. Okay, that's helpful for me. But yeah, no, these are good games to have on the Nintendo Switch Online catalog. So obviously not complaining at all. And then we got I don't know, was this announced like in the Nintendo Direct or just alongside? So I wasn't able to watch the Nintendo Direct live, and there was a lot of things that were announced kind of like concurrently with it. Chocobo GP. Did this show up in the Nintendo Direct or no?
Okay, so in the Japanese Nintendo Direct, they announced Cloud and Squall as characters, and then Square Enix tweeted about these in English, but they used weird wording that they haven't used since, where it's like you can get Cloud as part of the season pass. Now, when I see season pass, I think like DLC. That's what the word season pass usually means. Like, wait, Cloud is DLC. But no, it's more like a seasonal prize pass or a battle pass.
A battle pass,
battler. Yeah, but they call it a prize pass now. Like, if you go to the website now, basically Square Enix actually posted a blog post the day after the Direct that gave more details. It's like, so the thing is with Chocobo GP is that it's a game you can buy, but it's also a game you can play for free. So it's like a free-to-play game. So it's got some of these free-to-play limitations and mechanics in it.
Oh, I had no idea it's free-to-play also. Okay.
Yeah, there's like a light version that gives you like the multiplayer and some of the story. But yeah, you in the first season, and the seasons take like 2 months. One, Squall can be purchased from the shop. So however you can get Gil in the game, you can just buy Squall. But it sounds like he's going to be limited, so you have to buy him before the season ends. But Cloud, he's more like a seasonal prize. Like you do enough races and get enough points or whatever, and then you can earn
FOMO.
him. So when they say he's like part of the season pass, it's not like DLC. It's like a seasonal battle pass or racing pass. Specifically, they call it a prize pass now. So it was very confusing when Square said season pass, because it's not what we typically associate with season pass. But yeah, that's what they announced. It was not in the English Direct. It kind of came out from Square Enix on Twitter and their blog the day after. So in English.
I thought the wording was so weird. First of all, this game is releasing March 10th. Like, not interested in Chocobo GP? Let's change that. Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy VII joins the race in Season 1. He'll be a Season Pass exclusive reward. It just seems like...
Yeah. That is funny. Did they really say not interested in the question mark?
Not interested. So it's like, not interested? Well, we can leverage FOMO if you want Cloud. It's like, what? Like, I don't know. It just kind of turns me off. Like, all right. Even though I think this is obviously the kart racing style game.
I kind of lament that where kart racing is these days, dude. On like other battle pass reward the model. Like I remember Crash Team Racing and how they handled that.
Well, it's interesting that this was like Go ahead.
I was just this is a little bit of a tangent, but I wasn't really expecting Mario Kart 8 Deluxe to get more DLC. And granted, it's like remastered stuff. 9. Yeah, granted, it's like remastered stuff from earlier games, but still, it's like 48 more tracks.
Yeah, that's a crazy amount. Like, but you said
4 years later or whatever.
What? Yeah, I mean, like for people who like play Mario Kart, like and they love it, that's like a really good value deal. It's $25 for
Hey, it's like, hey, I already
more
own this
tracks.
game. I own a Switch. Like,
Yeah.
hey, if I can pay whatever it is, I don't know what the price was, like $19.99 or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's like 25
for
I think.
for more content for this game that I like to play at every party or whatever. Sure, like
Yeah.
seems like a
That's
smart decision for
And
me.
it'd be really cool to see like how your favorite tracks, like obviously they didn't like port it 1-to-1. It's like they kind of
Yeah.
went over it and like try to modernize it, make it look great.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool. Really cool. Good job, Mario Kart.
And not
2.
often you see a game get like new DLC like 4 years later or whatever it was.
It's
A game like that.
Yeah, this game is still on
Mhm.
fire all these years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the very last thing from the Nintendo Direct is one that we didn't cover on our site because it's more of an adventure game or maybe even a visual novel. And it is a Square Enix title, and that is the Centennial Case, a Shijima story, coming out for Switch, PS4, PS5, and PC. And I know this was
interesting because it was shown in the Japanese Direct and not in the English Direct, but Square Enix basically announced the English version right afterwards. So like people saw it in the Japanese Direct, and like I know some people were like, I want that. And then Square Enix is like, well, you can have it. Here it is. And so it is coming out in English in like May.
Tell me what is
it just wasn't
game,
in the Direct. Josh might be better to do that.
What is this
it's
game,
like a
Josh?
live action visual novel.
Yeah, there's a like live action mystery adventure game. So it uses all like live action actors, and it's basically like solving mysteries, and it's like kind of like it's like how
428 maybe.
Yeah, it's kind of like 428, but it has like actual like moving actors. It's not like screenshots of live people or live locations. So it's kind of almost presented like a TV show, but you're the one doing the investigating, and then Square Enix has like a pretty good, thorough trailer on how the gameplay is surrounded by, because it's like a lot of like social deduction on the fly as you're piecing like evidence and piecing the story together. It's a really, really cool trailer. I recommend people give it a shot if that sounds appealing to you. It's probably even though it wasn't shown in the Western Direct, it's probably the one game that really caught my eye. And like, even though it's not an RPG, I still do want to cover it to some extent on the site when it comes out, and because I really want to explore it for myself. I think this has the writer 428. Their name escapes me off the top of my head, and I love 428. Shibuya Scramble, and it's such a really, really bizarre thing of Square Enix to like publish like a big budget one of these sorts of like niche genre type games. It just came out of nowhere too. It reminds me a little bit of Izanagi Games' Death Come True, which came out several years ago.
And did we get a release date for this? Yes, we did. May 12th worldwide. So outside of the Nintendo Direct, we did have a few other pieces of news, and in the interest of time, we'll probably just have to kind of like rapid fire these. A lot of these are release dates or delays or things like that, or maybe a new trailer. So these will just kind of like, just kind of go through these, give them their due diligence. Edge of Eternity, which was a kind of an indie JRPG inspired game that released in the middle of last year, was developed by Midgar Studio. They were acquired by, I keep forgetting how to pronounce this, Nacon, the French publishing agency that ended up grabbing Spiders.
I think it is Nacon.
Nacon. So they're kind of like the French equivalent of Embracer Group, only maybe not quite as big.
They're a little bit more hobo.
Hobo.
What?
That's the adjective you go for.
I love it.
What they are is like they're actually like what they like specialize in are like peripherals, like controllers and stuff. And then they're like, man, we can publish games too. So they have a few developers under their belt now, and most of them are French. I think they acquired like 11 French publishers or developers
is Midgar
recently.
Studio
like
also French?
Yes, it's not a JRPG. It's like a French JRPG.
Well, I was careful to say
anime.
JRPG inspired. I just didn't realize that Midgar was also French, being acquired by a French publisher. So yep, that's just a little footnote.
French publisher acquiring a French studio. Yep,
cool. And I believe
Edge of Eternity came out on it came out on PC like last summer after an early access period, and then it like literally just came out for consoles.
And it's on Game
I hear,
Pass.
but I don't think any of us have played it. But from what broadly I hear that like the combat systems in it are actually pretty darn good. It's like turn-based, like with some positioning, almost like a Wild Arms 4 or 5. But I hear that some of the story stuff is pretty just, typical JRPG, like, exactly what you expect. So that's what I hear. That's just, impressions from it.
I wish we could spend more time on this next one. But we did finally, this is something that I thought we had kind of admitted defeat on, but got a localization announcement for something I wasn't sure we'd ever get. And that is Octopath Traveler Champions of the Continent. It is coming to North America and Europe this year in 2022 with a beta test set for spring, with more information to come at some point in February. So some point this month. And
I wonder if it'll work on Apple TV, because I would actually prefer to play it there if it can.
And make use out of your Apple TV investment.
Yeah, I don't know.
The kind of interesting thing about this announcement was that it was made in a Japanese live stream for like the 2.0 version, where they're obviously adding a bunch of stuff. And I think like an English Twitter account showed up, but I don't know if like Square Enix like themselves like on their English on their standard English channels like ever really mentioned it. So it, kind of like a under the radar sort of announcement from them.
I wonder if the Romancing Saga mobile game's been doing well in the West, because it seems like their mobile division, at least in the West, has been handled a little bit better recently. We haven't had anything like the Anamnesis shit in a while.
Yeah. Broadly, there's one thing about the Octopath mobile game that seems to be really interesting to me, just from like a game design standpoint, is that instead of like the game being separated by your protagonists, like the original, you had 8 separate sort of stories that we talked about earlier when we were talking about Live Alive. In the mobile game, which is a prequel, there's 3 different storylines, but they're separated by antagonist. So what that means is your characters in the game, as well as like the ones you recruit or whatever, they are allowed to interact more, because they're not so siloed off from each other, because their stories aren't separate. It's just like the stories revolve around the villains instead. And I heard it just kind of handles it a little bit better with that sort of design philosophy in terms of how this story is like split up. Also, you can have like 8 characters in battle, so I guess it probably gets a little bit more involved on the mechanical side too. However, I will probably not play this because it's a mobile game, and I just don't.
It's okay. I'll play the mobile games.
Well, I'm gonna play it because I've heard that the way that weapons work in it is you just buy them in shops and towns, like with regular free currency.
Yeah, you got your characters and whatnot, so
you don't really need them for the story. So I mean, if I just want to play it, I mean, Octopath had a good battle system.
I have no idea exactly how power curve works in this game. I don't really keep up with it, but I heard really good things about it.
I like how James was saying, like, I wonder if this will be on Apple TV, because you make use of that. For when I was playing through Fantasian, which really it is kind of a mobile game, but also playable on Apple TV. I played that all on my iPhone, and I got the Backbone like controller for it. So like another excuse to use my controller peripheral for my phone, maybe if it's compatible, which I have no idea if it is. But yeah, so this year at some point there'll be a beta test at some point. None of the details have been ironed out yet, but hopefully soon. All right, really quick rundown here of some of the other news from this week. Scarlet Nexus added both a free update that included like a photo mode and a very hard mode, as well as a new DLC called the Brain Eater Pack, which included like a new optional boss fight that was based on the anime. And I know
if you don't remember, the Brain Eater is Karin. Like that's his nickname. If you forgot, so.
And you basically played this and said it was basically like an hour of cutscenes in a battle. Like it's pretty seasonal.
So like this DLC is $7, which honestly it's probably not like worth that. But I actually did find it somewhat like interesting and satisfying that it basically is like an hour of scenes, kind of focusing on Karin in terms of slight spoilers, or actually major spoilers for Scarlet Nexus here.
Major spoilers. Nexus.
If you manage to stay this long in this podcast, here I am going to spoil Scarlet Nexus for you if you haven't played it already. It basically shows like how his first few time travel loops to the past went for him, and kind of how he's figuring out like what he's going to do to save Alice. And then also like what he does at the very end of the game. If you don't remember, he like basically disappears and then Alice shows up. So kind of what happens there. And so I actually found it kind of satisfying. It's not like anything new. It's not like something big and epic, like brand new, it's not even, most of it's not even playable, but like I found it kind of just an interesting sort of supplement, which is what a DLC should be, I suppose. Also, I wasn't really expecting this. There are some cutscenes that are like the fully animated modeled, like sequenced cutscenes in this DLC
some budget
that are pretty good. Yeah,
so
not just
you're telling me I should YouTube this.
Not just the comic book stuff. Yeah, you can just YouTube this if you want, I figure. So it's like, it was, it's interesting enough. Probably, like I said, admittedly, probably not worth $7, but for the boss fight or whatever you get with it. But just kind of like a little bonus for people who wanted a little bit more.
Which seems fine for like final DLC. Neo 2 has surpassed 2.5 million units. Best game of the year it released in my opinion. Yeah, Neo 2 is good. You should play it.
What is the Neo team working on now? Did they announce
Stranger?
It, right?
It's not Stranger of Paradise, right?
No, that's the Disgaea team. It's Dude, I know that they were wanting to make like a Ninja Gaiden type game, but I don't think it is Ninja Gaiden. Anyway, they're working on something. It's not an RPG, as far as we know.
So last year, like in May or so, we did talk about the early access release of the PC version of GetsuFumaDen, Undying Moon. And as far as I know, it's been in early... Yeah, from Konami. It's been in early access since then. And then it was kind of surprise announced that it was leaving early access and launching next week on the 17th and is also available on Nintendo Switch. So kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, I forgot that but we did talk about this on the podcast last year, but I'd kind of completely forgotten about it.
Yeah,
but
I want to check this out, but man, I'm so deep into Lost Ark. Fuck, I want to check this out.
Yeah, so that is available basically on Switch and PC, full release, the 1.0 release on February 17th. Now we basically got a lot more dates that I've kind of filtered in over the week. Final Fantasy VI Pixel Remaster. This was the one that we've been waiting on for a while. I'm kind of wondering when this one would finally land. We talked about this a little bit when Alex showed up about the art style shifts and things like that. It is releasing on February 23rd. And no, even though people were maybe expecting it, still PC and mobile exclusive for now. Some people were hoping for Switch announcement. Maybe during the direct. Did not happen, at least not yet, but it'll be available on PC and mobile on February 23rd.
A lot of opinions from the screenshots that were released for this Pixel Remaster.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of strong feelings.
I've grown to like the pixel art for the characters in these. They're
Why
all
is the green so neon?
One thing I noticed about and I think she might have said it in an interview, but for the pixel art for the characters, what's her name, Kazuya Shibuya, is made a few tweaks to them so that they slightly match like the Amano art a little bit more in terms of like color and things like that. And I know some people are maybe a little bit put by that because they're different than what they were. Like for example, I think like Realm in Final Fantasy VI is shown to have more of like a pink color, where she's more red in the original game, but like her Amano arc, there's a little bit more pink. So things like that. I've grown to like the pixel art for the characters, but right, there's this one screenshot. Is that Narsh, the town that Terra's near there? And then like the grass is like a neon Chernobyl green. It's really kind of weird. Like the Final Fantasy 5 and 4 and the other Pixel Masters didn't really have that, so it seems especially strange.
There's matching Terra's hair, man.
But yeah, I think I've mentioned this before. Final Fantasy VI is like the one Final Fantasy game. I played it when the GBA version came out like 17, 20 years ago, whenever that was. So it's been a while. So I'm interested to revisit it. I really liked it at the time, of course. But just we'll see now that I'm older and wiser. Yeah,
this is one of my favorite Final Fantasy entries, so I definitely want to revisit it for sure.
And then they tweeted out Hera's theme with the new rendition, and it sounds great. So
A short delay here. The Cruel King and the Great Hero. This is from Nipponichi and News America. Was originally supposed to launch on March 1st, like the first week of March. It got delayed about 10 days. It'll now launch on March 11th in Europe, March 15th in North America. So basically, just moving from early March to mid March on that game is releasing for Switch and PS4.
My assumption, they didn't give a reason, but my assumption is probably just some like supply chain thing where they just have to get it to the retailers is taking them longer than they thought or whatever.
That makes
That's
sense.
my guess.
I mean,
something
2 weeks,
something small. Yeah,
2 weeks, it's going to be something like that. If it's like 3 or 4 weeks, then
It's not a
something like certification.
it's more of a production thing and not a development thing, is my guess.
Kowloon Highschool Chronicle, which released last year on Nintendo Switch, and it originally released in Japan in 2004, but got localized last year as a Switch version. It is also getting a PlayStation 4 version in the West, releasing on March 18th. So if you didn't play it on Switch and would rather play it on PlayStation 4, it's getting a straightforward port there in just a month.
This
PC
is like an
release.
adventure. This is like an adventure game dungeon crawler.
Yeah.
From Arceus. Interesting thing here is that this announcement for the PlayStation 4 version is technically Europe only. Like it hasn't been confirmed for North America, which is a little weird.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, it's like P-Cube is doing the European release, and usually Arceus does the NA release, but they haven't officially announced it themselves. That said, P-Cube has like a physical edition that you can buy, and they ship it anywhere. So,
yeah, I mean, that's how I got my physical copy for Switch.
Right.
I don't need to play that. It's like
I hear it's good.
I was going to play it last year, and it's like I started it. It's really, really cool. It's fascinating. But then I looked up how long to beat for it, and it's like, oh, it's 50 hours long. And it's like, oh.
That's a lot. I mean, maybe not for an RPG, but it's...
I mean, it's a dungeon RPG. It's a dungeon RPG.
It's hard to just slot in a weekend. Just one, you know.
Yeah.
So now it'll be available in English on both the Switch and the PS4.
Yep.
Another indie game that released last year that I don't think we were able to cover is Chernobylite, which is kind of a like an indie survival horror RPG. It originally released for Steam last summer. It had an early access period as well. It will launch for next-gen consoles at PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series on April 21st, alongside with the enhancements being included in the PC version. So Chernobylite, I don't know if we'll get around to playing this one, but for those that have played it,
it leans a little bit more survival. It leans a little bit more survival than RPG, but you know, survival mechanics are kind of they're related.
Inherently like resource management, which makes it very similar to RPGs.
I hear it's a pretty good game, you know, if you're into that sort of style in terms of like survival, and it's like post-apocalyptic, and so.
This is something that I think Alexander Seedhouse is the only one that can speak to this. Warhammer 40k Chaos Gate Demon Hunters is releasing on Warhammer 40k Chaos Gate Demon Hunters, launching on May 5th for PC. And he is the only Warhammer nut that I really know, so I would have to ask him to like what this game actually is. But
it's like a tactical RPG, like Amish, I think.
It has a turn-based tactical RPG.
Oh god, what's the guy who did Gollum? What's his name? It has that guy.
Andy something.
Yeah, Andy Serkis.
Yeah,
he's a voice, and they advertise that, so that's a thing.
Has Andy Serkis? All right.
Yes. He even introduces the new trailer. Like, hi, I'm Andy Serkis. Here's a game.
Salt and Sacrifice is launching on May 10th for PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, and PC. And this was originally announced last year. Yeah, last June. So around the summer, like proto E3 period, whatever.
During those E3 stream things, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully this does really well. Salt and Sanctuary was a really neat game for its time, and I'm really curious what a new one of those looks like this year. Salt and Sanctuary was like one of the first like things that like tried to like copy Souls in a different way.
I gather that a lot of people played Salt and Sanctuary on Vita, Is what I've
Oh yeah,
gathered.
I can see
and
that.
I've actually seen people like say to the developer here, like, put Salt and Sacrifice on Vita. Like, I
Yeah,
don't
but
care if
they
that's not
can't.
feasible. Do it.
I'm
They
sure they
can't.
would love to if it was still feasible and possible.
Yeah, Sony, that just reminds me, during Sony's financials, they said, here's how many millions of units we sold for every PlayStation system, except Vita. Don't ask us about Vita.
To be honest, if they didn't have that asterisk there, I wouldn't have even like. I just forgot that like Vita existed. Like, oh yeah,
I wouldn't have.
I would have.
And the last announcement that I think we have here is the announcement of Disgaea 6 Complete, from Disgaea 6 Defiance of Destiny, which originally released last year in the West on Switch only. We've talked about a few times on the podcast how it was also on PlayStation in Japan, but now this new Complete edition, which is launching this summer, will be PlayStation 4, PC, and PlayStation 5. Wait, is the Switch version not getting Disgaea 6 Complete?
It's just cosmetic DLC.
So basically you get Disgaea 6 Complete on Switch by getting Disgaea 6 and buying the DLC.
Yeah, I've seen a few people complain like they should release this on Switch that just comes with the DLC. Maybe they'll, I don't know, do some
like a gold
DLC
edition
bundle or something. Yeah, but right for now, it's basically the DLC. What it is, it's some like color change cosmetics, like just like palette swap stuff, but also like various, like every main pair of characters from the previous games are basically DLC characters in this one, so they're all included now,
Well,
and some other characters.
What about the VTuber DLC thing, man?
Oh, I don't know about the VTuber stuff. I don't know if that's DLC or if that's actually just in the game. I don't remember.
Now, this wasn't like the release date is still just set for summer, but I guess Nippon Ichi announced that the PlayStation 5 version, at least in Japan, will launch on June 16th. So maybe that'll be the date for the rest of it. But yeah, a date in Japan specifically for the PlayStation 5 version in June. I'm guessing.
I think one of those announcement oddities is that the Japanese version of this announcement does not mention Steam at all, which is a little weird because usually they do, even if it's like later.
GS time?
Yeah, but they didn't. They like the Steam release announcement is only from NIS America, even though like the Steam release does say it'll support like Japanese text and audio and everything. So that's just kind of one of those weird oddities.
So basically, if you like the last couple of games that I rattled off and adding to the stuff that we already talked about in the Nintendo Direct, really starting to fill in those March, April, May, even June and September, and some nebulous summer, like starting to fill in the year and starting to get stuff marked on our calendar. And we already know that the back end of February is going to be completely packed. So here we are. Got to make time for everything. Never going to get around to trying Lost Ark, even though I kind of want to after the discussion today. But yeah, I'm looking at the timestamp. Like we had an hour and 10-minute podcast last week, and here we are at the past the 3 hour
Thanks,
mark.
Alex. Hijack the Hucket podcast is like, guess what? I'm like, oh boy.
But also the Nintendo for piling so much good shit in their Nintendo Directs. But it was really good.
Yeah, before we get out of here, there's one more thing. Just one more thing.
Is there? I may say, take it away.
Babylon's Fall will be having a demo for PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4 on February 25th. So whoever wants to get a taste of the future of Platinum games as a service.
Oh yeah. We kind of talked about it earlier. We weren't sure like what the deal is with Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes. When I was looking up the Japanese name to see what exactly they were calling it in Japan, I came across a news post. I already tweeted about it. You've probably already seen it because it seems to be blowing up already. But basically, the wording is that it is literally another possible route. It's the same world, the same Faldland. It's just another possible story that could have happened.
I mean, considering there were 4 routes already, it's like, what's the harm in adding a 5th one?
Yeah.
By the way, it was the right decision not to have a golden route in that game. I will stand by that until I die.
Now they can sell you the
golden route
for $60.
Yeah. Awesome. And just like that, as soon as Babylon's Fall is mentioned, people want to go back to Fire Emblem, so I don't blame them. So there you go. So yeah,
you just hijack one of the next podcasts. Like we're now talking about Babylon's Fall. I don't know.
Exactly. But
All right,
yeah,
if you've made it to the end of this podcast, thank you so much, and I'm
Sorry.
sorry. But
Yeah.
if you go to rpgsite.net right now, the very top heading cover story will be Alex's Live Alive feature, and we also have the Elden Ring preview, and now you'll be able to read Amy's take on that, along with listening to Alex's experience with that, with the game hands-on. We have the Pokemon Legends Arceus review from Jess, so thank you so much to her for writing that up, and you can listen to our previous podcast discussion on that game as well as the Atelier Sophie 2 question and answer session that we were able to get from Paige, along with, of course, all of the news from the Nintendo Direct that we rattled off here. If you want to double check all the release dates or all the specific media and artwork that was released for each of those, you can find us on any of the social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at RPG Site. You can join our Discord, discord.gg/RPG Site. And we have also all the guides up on our main page for Arceus, a few for Final Fantasy 14, and probably not for Lost Ark, but they're out there from the original Korean and Russian releases if you're playing that game. And I'm sure we'll be discussing that on the podcast in the upcoming weeks as people work their way through that. Thank you so much for listening. We will be back next week. Maybe we'll dive into some more of these topics in a little bit further detail, or, we might be upended by another surprise set of news points that we can't even anticipate. So we'll see. And we'll also start getting into the release windows for a lot of these upcoming February releases that we're looking forward to. So until next time, take care, stay safe. We'll see you then.
And hop on Lost Ark.